You're brave. It means you have to be prepared for more than the rest of us.
You only have to hunker down for a couple days a year. So
I have heard some customers of PGE, there's actually 150,000 without power, and up to the current estimate is up to 10 days. That's a long time.
Yeah, I was just looking at their website. They have an update from noon today for communicating how many transmission lines are out, how many transformers, how many neighborhood lines, and the whole breakdown by zip code. It's really hard on a lot of people. I get it totally. You know.
And don't forget that Northeast is all Pacific Power, not PGE. So.
Yep. Heavy snow and ice is no fun at all. That's for sure. Yeah.
Well, I had to go rescue my son. He lives off of Skyline, and I went and got them yesterday. They were out of power, couldn't get to them, so they had to actually hike out on their street about a half a mile. Skyline was closed, but I had just enough space in Skyline and Burnside that I could navigate down Barnes and get back. But yeah, they're living with us now again till they get electricity. So
Dad
we're
to
all
the
together
rescue again. Way to go, Commissioner Willie.
Should have asked you to bring me some milk.
Yeah, I swung right by your driveway. I could have done that, you know.
Okay, Commissioner Rogers, I assume will join the video in a moment. So welcome back, everyone. It's 1 o'clock and we're reconvening our Washington County Board of Commissioners work session. And our first topic is the Salmonberry Trail status update and Salmonberry Trail Foundation funding request. And I see that we have Jean-Paul Bowles with us, as well as Stephen Roberts. So take it away, please.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you guys.
Commissioners. So really today, I'm really just here to introduce John Paul and then let him go through the presentation. So the Salmonberry Trail, obviously it's a great project and there's been a lot of work done up to date to try to help make it become a reality. And John Paul is going to walk us through a little bit of that and also some potential next steps. And as you mentioned, then a funding proposal request. And I thought maybe before I turn it over to John Paul, if Commissioner Willie, I know this is an important project for you. I don't know if you would like to add any initial comments or anything.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And thanks, John Paul, for you being here and the commission finding a spot on the work session for this. This, as you know, over the last couple of years, has been one of my priority projects. This has a tremendous amount of potential for our tourism, but also just all of you, I think, probably have been on the Banks Vernonia Trail and how popular that is. This has the ability to meet and exceed, I think, those expectations. So I'm really looking forward to John Paul's presentation here. I've gone through the slide presentation, but also, John Paul, just for your information, the Oregonian article that you did a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I can't remember what the date of it was, but I had forwarded that on to the commissioners as well, and they had an opportunity to see that. And that was just a great kind of a documentary on the potential for the trail and certainly some hands-on footage there. So good job with that. And yeah, I look forward to your presentation. So thank you for being here.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate time with all of you, and Commissioner Willie, thank you for the conversations that have led to this. My hope is that this is a deeper conversation that leads to an even deeper, truer partnership between the Salmonberry Trail Foundation and Washington County. Obviously, this has been a very challenging year for all of us as citizens of Oregon, and I'm sure for you guys in the positions that you're in, dealing with a lot of extra work with less resources. And that is the case, of course, for these types of projects that we really want to help continue and carry momentum through as well. Quick question on logistics. Should I take over the screen share or just give an indication to switch slides?
Yep. Just say next slide. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next slide, please. The mission of the Salmonberry Trail Foundation is to build the Salmonberry Trail. We've been anointed by the Salmonberry Trail Intergovernmental Agency as the organization to raise funds for, build, and I think eventually maintain the trail as well. So this looks like having a non-motorized trail that connects through Washington County, the Portland metro area, all the way along to the city of Tillamook, along the Port of Tillamook Bay Rail Trail Corridor. As I'm sure you all know, this is an incredibly beautiful place, not only the rolling farmlands in Washington County, but coming into the heart of the project in the canyon in the Tillamook State Forest, and then running down along the Nehalem River and eventually along 101. So really incredible opportunities for connectivity here. Also, just as a quick note, I will try to get through these slides somewhat quickly and would love to have a conversation and take your guys' questions. So feel free to let me know if you have them along the way, or I can take several at the end. Next slide, please. So this is what it looks like. And really, this is only part of the story. Part of what I love about this trail is the way it engages the Tillamook State Forest, a public land resource that is one of the few, I would say, underutilized public natural resources in the area. Another thing that this doesn't show, but that we'll get to, is the connectivity that this trail will provide. So looking at the western portion of the map, the Oregon Coast Trail will eventually connect the Oregon coast from the Washington to California border. So this trail would also provide connectivity to the entire length of the Oregon coast. Next slide, please. So, you know, I would love to be standing in front of you guys in person and have a really impassioned speech around how this project fits into the legacy of Oregon and the importance for the culture of our state, and especially the importance given all of the challenges that we're facing right now, particularly in the metro area. That, along with so many other things, is really hard in Zoom. So I want to share that passion with you guys, and I'm really glad you saw that video. I hope it came through there. But I also want to talk through some of the very practical nuts and bolts of the benefits of this system and some of the ways that we are positioning ourselves to be relevant now. I'm going to be speaking to you guys through the lens of increasing relevance to all of our stakeholders, you and your constituency and others, and also in terms of return on investment for the trail and for the Salmonberry Trail Foundation specifically. So one of the most exciting things about this trail is its connectivity, not just to urban parts of Washington County, but the whole Portland metro area. This map is a regional trail system plan that is owned by Metro, and it shows existing trails and planned trails throughout the region. And as you see up here on the top left corner, where the two lines start to converge, that small one, which is the overlap between the Banks-Vernonia Trail, State Trail, and the Salmonberry Trail. And what's really great about it is through these emerging trails that you see in yellow dot, there will be access to the Salmonberry from public transportation sites, out the back door from many areas. You could get on your bike and take a ride and access a piece of truly remote, somewhat remote forest, state forest. And I think this is particularly relevant today as we sit in a context where conversations about equal access and racial justice should be front and center. And there's a small but important role for us to play in the trails community to tie into that and contribute to that conversation. So we're not just looking at, we're looking at a gorgeous trail that goes through Washington County to the coast, but we're also looking at a spine that connects to a network of urban trails throughout the region that Metro is investing in, that many of your staff in the planning department and cities throughout Washington County are putting resources into. So that connectivity is a really important piece and one of the elements that I'm most excited about. Next, please. Quick overview here of the role of the organization that I'm with, the Salmonberry Trail Foundation, in relation to the intergovernmental agency. The Salmonberry Trail Intergovernmental Agency, of which Commissioner Willie is a part, as well as Deanna Valentine, both really incredible to work with, and I really appreciate all that you guys have done for the trail and for helping me get on board and up to speed. and taking these next steps. So that intergovernmental agency has representatives from the state forester to the head of state parks and other elected officials, the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, and a few other parties as well. Very importantly, that group has created a strategy, which has been to say, all right, we as the IGA aren't going to be the group that implements this trail, that makes it happen. We need what will essentially become a Friends of organization, a nonprofit to do the work. So through that, the Salmonberry Trail Foundation was stood up in 2019 and started running in 2020. I am the first and interim executive director and really appreciate the role. It's a great fit for me, and I'm really honored to work on this project. So we as an organization have a board of directors that is separate from the folks who make up STIA and do a lot of work to try to coordinate between both of those entities. Next slide, please. There are a lot of activities that aren't on this timeline, but some key benchmarks are here. This rail line, for those of you who may not know, was commercially active until 2007, when the second 100-year storm or flood in the previous 2 decades washed away the rail line. And given where the commercial traffic was at the time, it wasn't financially feasible to reinvest FEMA funding again in rebuilding the rail line. So there in 2014, the Senate bill was signed into law supporting the construction of the Salmonberry Trail, essentially saying, hey, yes, this is a good idea. Unfortunately, that is, as of yet, an unfunded mandate from the state, but the political support through STIA really is tremendous. 2015, a concept plan for what this might look like was developed. In 2017, Cycle Oregon came in with a commitment of funding to help get the initiative off the ground. 2018, a lease agreement was signed between the Port of Tillamook Bay and STIA. And that has essentially taken care of a lot of the logistics and red tape for getting a trail throughout this rail line, which is really fortunate because dealing with a patchwork of landowners is a big challenge for trails projects like this. So we're very fortunate in having the right of way and that being banked and the lease signed between STIA and Port of Tillamook Bay. In 2019, Washington County Visitors Association and Tillamook County awarded several $100,000 to complete planning. That is for the middle 2 sections, the river and canyon segment plans. The initial 2 sets for the valley and coast have been completed in 2017. And as I mentioned, in 2020, our young organization was founded to help do this work. Next slide, please. So part of this conversation today is certainly us coming to the table and looking for a funding relationship with Washington County. I think, leading up to that ask, to that conversation, I'd love to have more dialogue about how we can best deliver value to you as a county, realizing that this is a challenging time for budgets for a lot of organizations, certainly state agencies and many of the counties as well. We need a business plan to function as an organization and to make this happen. And as I'm sure many of you know, capacity and planning funding is the hardest to come by. So part of our request is that Washington County be a backbone funder and over a few years contribute quarterly. And our vision for that being that we go out and land other backbone funders so that we have a more diverse income stream and we are able to get off the ground as an organization. And I'll talk through in a bit what that business model looks like down the line as we get into building trail. The timing is right for this right now. We have a whole lot of work has been done. This project has largely been carried on through funding from the Visitors Association and Tillamook County and some other STIA members as well. And this is a really pivotal point of wrapping up with a really high level planning that needs to happen before we get a couple more things in place and start building trail. There's tremendous public support for this project. There's also a perception that, boy, folks have been talking about this for a long time. Let's see something get on the ground, which again is a role of the Salmonberry Trail Foundation. So we are asking that the county consider partnering and leveraging those investments that have been made historically as we're in this important transition from planning to implementation. Also, it's also worth noting that I'm having a similar conversation with Tillamook County and the STIA representative, Commissioner Scar. So would hope to build a coalition around this backbone funding that provides us the organizational stability to go out and raise funds and build trail, rather than being in the loop that some nonprofits frankly get stuck in, of looking for short-term funding to keep the lights on, and then finding themselves in that situation where a lot of the energy is going toward internally rather than mission aligned. Another thing to note is that we have a $360,000 capacity proposal into the MJ Murdoch Charitable Trust, and we'll get a decision on that funding at the end of February. The idea there being that we would use that pot of funds to hire a development director and communications manager as one position, and a construction project manager as another position. So really looking at how we can also engage the public and philanthropic world in diversifying income for the organization over time. Next slide, please. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what that looks like for us as an organization to be mission focused and return investment, not only the investment that the Visitors Association has made and the generous amount of time Commissioner Willie and Diami have put into this project, but really the model that we are looking to refine and franchise to get this thing done. Fortunately, the Salmonberry Trail is a priority project for regional solutions, both on the North Coast and Portland Metro area. And what that does is open up incredible relationships with the state agencies who will be looking to for significant portions of infrastructure funding. So, part of my job in that realm will be to attract these different regional, state, and federal programs and to cultivate relationships so that we have identified what types of public funding opportunities will come up and when, and how we can be in position to capture those funds and bring them into Washington County, bring them into Tillamook County to build trail. That work requires, onto the second chevron here, a lot of convening, a lot of relationship building. This is now conceived as an 87-mile trail, and it's going to get built a mile or less at a time. I think we can do a lot longer, bigger chunks in Washington County, but particularly on the coast, some of these are going to be smaller bites, a couple of $1 million here, a mile there. And so, those are convening conversations with folks in planning departments at the county level, municipality. It's calling on those regional solutions, agency relationships, and having a coalition lined up so that we have the right content and technical input to put into our proposals. It's also coordinating cash match funding for those, support for implementation, and making sure that we are integrating or building on existing plans. One example of that being a proposal we just submitted in addition to the proposal submitted for Washington County in Rockaway, where we were able to build off of a tsunami evacuation plan and safe routes to school, and tie in our ODOT proposal in a way that says, hey, we acknowledge what's happening in this community, the community is involved, and here's the way this is going to help build off of those existing efforts. So really truly looking how we partner with Washington County as a county, and also the communities along the trail. And then from there, as we begin to refine that process and apply for more funding, Salmonberry Trail Foundation will have a role in administering those programs, helping manage construction, hiring and managing vendors, reporting out, etc. So essentially, the ask around capacity funding in particular is putting fuel in the tank to deliver on a system and process that has some really favorable wind at its back in terms of the folks who are around the table and the proposals that are being submitted. Of course, funding is pretty tight now with some of these agencies, but we see quite a few more opportunities on the horizon. And I'm very confident in this model that we can refine it and scale it so that any additional investment that Washington County made in the organization would bring in 6- and 7-figure returns in terms of getting trails funding on the ground. And part of what I would like to do today is to get deeper into a conversation of how the Salmonberry Trail Foundation can add value to Washington County. Some of those concepts might be things like contributing to an active transportation plan and the Salmonberry playing a role in that. The method we have for convening stakeholders around specific pieces of infrastructure development is something that could be replicated. And I'm sure as parallel work is being done with other potential trails like Council Creek and a lot of the great momentum that you guys have in the county in trails in general. So really tying those things together. Could be, in addition, some planning work. For example, the conversations with Tillamook County are broadened out to what would it look like to have a countywide trails plan. They had applied for a trails coordinator position that wasn't funded last year. So part of that conversation is what could STF do to help fill that role, at least in part, while some of those bigger pieces get put together, or to help lay the foundation for that type of position, or just to simply play some of that role as part of how we are building the relationship with Washington County and building off the work of the Salmonberry Trail. And as I mentioned, we'll also be pursuing private funding and corporate partnerships. So we'd be looking to leverage any funding that you have with, again, those corporate sponsors and the philanthropic network in the future. And again, here, just want to underscore the point of we want to add value as an organization. We know that we need to, and we'd love to have a deeper dialogue with you as commissioners and with the county and how we can do that. Next slide, please. My favorite thing about working for the Salmonberry Trail Foundation is sharing my passion for the project. I truly love this place, and I am a big believer in the importance of us moving our bodies more and being more connected with nature, connecting urban and rural communities. At the same time, that conversation, when I start to have it with a lot of folks, goes pretty quickly to, hey, you guys have been talking about this. We've been hearing about this for a long time. Where's the trail? So we have a very bright focus on getting trail on the ground. And again, with the planning process that will be wrapped up by the end of February, we are in line to do that. For the work specifically in Washington County, we need to go through land use planning. And of course, we have a bit more preliminary engineering to do, but there are certainly sections where we would be able to brush the rail line. And once we have an operations and maintenance agreement in place, remove ties and track and have a soft surface trail that we could open to the public and allow access on. And it wouldn't be a perfect trail. It wouldn't be the wide paved multi-use trail that is envisioned. But I think it will help build a whole lot of support and answer that question of, well, where's the trail? And that public support will manifest in increased funding and support so that trail surface and infrastructure improves over time as additional investments come in. Next slide, please. In having these conversations prior to Commissioner Scooten leaving his seat, he asked me, what would it look like to add seed funding onto an ask? What would you guys be able to do that you wouldn't be able to otherwise? And that was a really wonderful exercise for me to think through and talk through with board members. And essentially what that would do is help us get into programming. There are ways that we as an organization can be relevant to your constituents in Washington County prior to having a beautiful trail that connects the coast and the county. And some of that would look like having stewardship events that get folks outside. We had a great walk with BIPOC leaders from Washington County over the summer and got good inputs on what it would look like to do meaningful work in that space. And I'd love to start working there, including contracting with organizations that would help us create the type of programming that, one, they see as most relevant. But some of the kind of clues or suggestions we got were around having people with different backgrounds in the outdoors together. For example, in stewardship events, or working with youth on, some basic outdoor or backpacking skills. Some of the other things are representing brown people in collateral in outdoor recreation. There's very little of that. So us having additional photography and doing a photo shoot, and, really partnering before we acted here to make sure that that we're acting in the most effective ways. But it's something, it gives a hint of what we can do in the interim while we're building trail to be a part of the community. As I mentioned, our a top priority is opening trail from the Manning Trailhead west. And again, I think that would be well suited to doing it in phases and having a low cost solution that gets people on the ground. The Banks Vernonia State Trail had 22,000 visitors in July of 2020 at the Manning Trailhead. So that relatively new infrastructure is clearly taxed already, and there's a really significant demand for places to people to get outside and move, especially some of these trails that are more accessible for families and older folks who may be looking for a flatter surface. We're also looking to scale a stewardship program. We've been piloting some of that and would use funding to help grow that program. And it will really actually decrease cost of trail construction in the future, getting crews out there to have things brushed. And then we would look at how we could get a salvage crew out to get some rail and ties and hopefully open soft surface trail. And this is all quite a bit easier said than done. And hopefully nobody in the planning department is wringing their hands too much about, kind of a quick overview bullet points like this. Of course, there are things to get through and things to be done to make that happen. But I do believe that this sort of low cost, on the ground, quickly approach will be really beneficial and will help us build a lot of public support and answer that question of, well, where's the trail? And of course, part of this, and certainly part of what seed funding would do, would allow me as an executive director to go full time. I work about half-time ostensibly on this project, though it's quite a bit more. And having run a consulting business in outdoor recreation and sustainable tourism, this would be an incredible opportunity to be fully dedicated to helping make this project happen and really carry forward the momentum that's happening now. Next slide, please. Circling back to the ask for backbone funding, which is $10,000 quarterly over 3 years. Again, that would go towards hiring a full-time executive director, which would complement those positions that we applied for in the Murdoch funding, that being the development and communications director and a project manager. And then a big part of my role to help ensure that this is a good investment for the county is to build the Salmonberry Trail Foundation as a smart nonprofit with a good business model. And in my experience, that looks like a diversity of income streams so that there is not an over reliance on any one income source, and some room for additional capacity funding that we would hold in reserve to make sure that we as an organization continue to move things forward. I mentioned before that an incredible amount of work has been done around this project, and it has, and a lot of that has been volunteer time for folks who are now on the Salmonberry Trail Foundation board. And I think for this initiative, for this project to take a leap forward, it is certainly time to have an organization with capacity and dedicated focus on making it happen. And I think that will help really the trajectory and velocity of the initiative moving forward. Next slide, please. So one example of what this looks like in the near term is to create connectivity between the Banks Vernonia and the Salmonberry Trail alignment. And we are well into conversations with Chris Gerdes, the manager of Stubbs Stewart State Park, and have identified a spot in the southern portion of the trail where we would be able to build a connector at a low cost that would connect the existing Banks Vernonia with the future Salmonberry Trail. And we have volunteers lined up who are ready to go to help make that trail happen. And the bit of communication we put out around that opportunity has gotten really great responses from folks so far. So specifically, were we to implement this plan of moving west from the Manning Trailhead, as well as creating this connector, we could already add really significant trail miles to a very high use area in Washington County, and also create a loop option from Manning Trailhead where a user could go on the Banks Vernonia or the Salmonberry and then connect in Stubbs Stewart State Park and complete a loop. So there would be hopefully a very quick return on investment that is very visible to the public in that regard. Next slide, please. So some of the other opportunities that would highly leverage any investment that the county would be willing to make would be non-motorized transportation funding, which has received a serious boost for the next cycle, which starts in 24-27. And of course, we're taking a pretty long-term view here. And then the box to the bottom right here on bond program areas refers to the Metro Nature Bond. We as an organization have been positioning ourselves with Metro and asking questions about how we can bring some of that resource. It's around 40 million for trail development to Washington County for the Salmonberry Trail, as well as what it might look like for us to be a visionary project. And of course, some of that is a bit preliminary, but we've put a lot of time into it, and we'll be in position to help receive and process some of these funds. And I think one of the challenges for recipients for organizations that are eligible for this funding in the area is going to be having the foundation that allows them to be a good candidate to receive significant portions of Metro Nature Bond funding. So the planning work that we've completed puts us in a really good position for that. And as we become a more robust organization, we'd be very well positioned to help process some of these funds or to help receive some of these funds. So that's one way where we'd like to add value and be an infrastructure that can help bring additional of this Metro Nature Bond money into Washington County. And then this grant funding tracker up top is something that I brought in from my consulting business, and I think will be a really effective model for us. It is essentially a calendar that is populated with state, federal, even local funding opportunities that might be relevant to different portions of the trail, who the program leads are for these, and when the applications are open. So basically looking at an ongoing cultivation, proposal development, and submission for local, state, federal programs that will contribute 6-7 figures at a time to building trail. Next slide, please. Quite a bit of funding has gone into the Salmonberry to date. Tillamook County has contributed significantly towards planning. Washington County Visitors Association has contributed at several different points for planning, as well as some capacity, which is particularly helpful. And Washington County having contributed some to capacity in the past as well. Thank you for that. It's hard funding to come by and very important. A lot of the funding that so the funding that has been that is represented here has been executed, and as you see, there's not been a lot of next slide, please. Funding that has gone into building the capacity of the organization. And so, we have a great set of plans now. It reflects a lot of investment, a lot of technical input, and very good process, and an organization that is poised to do the work to implement on those plans, but needs some runway and basically angel investor or seed funding, if you will, to sustain itself over time and continue that model I just talked through of pursuing public funding, one step at a time, building an iconic trail by pursuing those grants, which of course, as I think you all know, will eventually contribute to Washington County in many ways, just wellness and active transportation, but certainly through growing the tax base, whether it's people coming out to ride the trail, a short section of the trail for the afternoon, or visitors coming in from a long ways off and starting their trip or ending their trip in Washington County. And we would also like to be more actively building community through some of those things that I mentioned, like stewardship events and partnering with Black and Brown led organizations that are looking for outlets to get more folks outdoors and contribute to more equal access to the outdoors. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I think I think I've covered a lot of this ground and wanted to leave us some room for conversation. Just circling back to the idea of what our business plan is. This chart here comes from the proposal to Murdoch, and the big blue bar at the bottom represents the funding that we would receive from Murdoch. It's important to note that this funding does not go towards general organizational capacity or existing executive director role. So the expectation is, as the funding sunsets, basically it would be full funding of those positions in year 1, 2/3 in year 2, 1/3 in year 3. So we as an organization, as we strengthen and become more robust, bring in funding from other sources to supplement that funding and continue to grow more broadly as an organization. So of course, having a development director is part of that, and increasing relationships and funding from corporations, but also individuals who follow us on social media and get our newsletter. And then also, major donors as well, the philanthropic network that really takes some coordination and expertise to really tap into well. To date, the Salmonberry Trail Foundation board has funded a lot of the capacity for the organization. They've let me do the work that I've been here doing the last 8 or 9 months. And we would expect that would continue as well. So again, looking at how we as an organization grow over time by diversifying our income streams, using Murdoch funding and hopefully Washington County funding as well, to really launch and get trajectory. Next slide, please.
I'm sorry to interrupt real quickly. I just wanted to do a time check. I think we're down to about 10 minutes of allotted time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think with that, would you mind just toggling through the next couple? Yeah, we'll go ahead and wrap it up here then. And I'd love to take any questions, hear any comments, concerns that you have. Thank you for
Commissioners, questions, comments?
I have a question. And I apologize, I'm off camera. My internet's been a little unstable. Thank you very much. This is very exciting. What are your plans for maintenance long-term? How does that play into this?
Yeah, operations and maintenance is one of the clear hurdles that we need to get over before we can open sections of the trail. The preliminary conversation is with Lisa Assumption with OPRD to see if they would be willing to do maintenance on this, similar to how they do on the Banks Vernonia State Trail. I think the issue there will be capacity and demonstrating that Salmonberry Trail Foundation in the future can evolve into a Friends of group who goes out and does a lot of that actual work, so it's not increasingly taxing OPRD's resources. I think that would be certainly relevant to the Washington County portion of the trail. And there is some to be determined element in the portion that is in Tillamook County. And so I'm having those conversations with their county commission as well. And my plan, frankly, is to bring in money to build trails so that it forces the conversations and forces some decisions.
You want to get to maintenance, right?
Yeah, that's right. So, I think for now, that conversation can sit a bit more than we might like it to, because we don't have funding to build, a significant portion of the trail. But as soon as we do, it really, it puts the ball back in the STIA court for us to really figure those things out.
Okay, other commissioner questions and comments? I just want to make sure we stay on time.
I have a couple of quick comments. Thank you for your presentation. I know that Commissioner Willie is deeply involved in spending his time, as did Commissioner Terry before him, and I think Commissioner Dyke was involved in this as well. A couple of three really, really quick points. One, Commissioner Treese made, I think for at least me, though I am excited and I understand the seed money, I think you need to think about how you're going to maintain it. I think that's an important issue. Great projects that don't, sustain themselves are not so great projects. So that would be one. Number two, in regard to the activeness of this, nature isn't just for active people. There are a lot of people who aren't quite as mobile. And so I would hope that you would consider people who are maybe, have impairments of various natures, that they would be able to access and enjoy, as well as your elderly population. Because if you're just building something that only serves a very small fit group, it's not quite as appealing as something that, would have access for all. In that regard, you might think about stripping all those rails out. And I understand that the gauge is such and the width is such, but maybe you'd have something where people who are less mobile could get on a little tiny cart and be able to see this scenic wonderland. So I wouldn't preclude any of those options. And to the administrative functions, because I won't ask a whole bunch, I have others, but I'll just ask this last one. Is there a clawback provision? We're government. We're not we're not a private foundation who, okay, I put some money in and it didn't materialize, so it goes away. We have to have some way of recouping. And so usually there's clawback provisions, and we do those on housing. We do them on lots of things. It says, okay, despite everybody's 10,000 pound effort and every good intention, if this thing doesn't work, who ends up with the trails, and is there a way for governments to come in and accept responsibility? I don't want to prejudge it, and I certainly don't want to make it sound like your foundation isn't really great, but you know, a good plan has a good exit strategy to it too. So anyway, you might comment. That's it.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback.
Commissioner Fye?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Great presentation, John Paul, and great to see you. I think I really like your vision for the trail. I myself and few leaders in Washington County, leaders of color, utilize your opportunity to go on a tour with you and go on a long trip and see all the great work that you're doing and how you're trying to include, you know, especially the racial justice focus and including different people who've been left out of park spaces or public spaces. So I really appreciate. I think you asked two questions for me, and the first question to the question of should the board allocate $100,000 to the Salmonberry the Trail Foundation for capacity. You know, for me, one of the things when I was reading over this material over the weekend, this is something that I would, you know, wholeheartedly, immediately, without even thinking about support, only if we weren't in COVID and if I didn't get calls from, you know, in my short time of office from businesses who are financially hurt. And if I didn't see any, you know, if I didn't have direct firsthand experience of community-based organizations who are combating this COVID virus with the smallest budget, I would have said yes to this request and actually supported immediately to pass and to give you the 100,000. But I think right now, with everything that's happening in 2020, from 2020 and then spilling over 2021, I'm not sure if it's the fiscally responsible thing to do in the middle of this right now. And to the second request, I would say the 10,000, I think that's a reasonable request for Washington County to invest 10,000 quarterly to this, because I've seen in like my quick hike, I've seen the impact and I see the magnitude and how feasible your vision is of making this a reality in all the counties the trail spills over. And then I think, you know, this isn't you, this is more of our county administrator question, Miss Angie. You know, I like to, for me as a new commissioner, I like to understand how is the funding request process, and how can we make this such opportunity accessible to other entities in Washington County? You know, because I wasn't aware of other entities could come to the county and ask a large request like that. So I think I just wanted to sidebar this for our county administrator. So I do support the 10,000 allocation. I'm so there you go. I'll end right there. I know we're crunched on time. I see you, Chair.
There's a question to Ms. Angie. Ms. Angie, would you like to address that first?
Yes. So there's a couple ways to look at this. This can be looked at as a trail strategic priority. And so this is a way to leverage funds from other partners to move forward that priority. This also can be viewed as similar to our community, what's called community network funds. I would suggest in this case, though, if the board does want to pursue that, there would actually be an agreement in place with the foundation that would list out and have an expiration date so that it was clear that this agreement would come back to the board. And I will call it, I've typically called it performance contracting. So what is that? What are those performance clauses that we would be requiring? I would also further suggest that within that contract, we do have provisions around equity too and community engagement if the board would so choose to move forward. Typically, a request like this would be presented as part of the upcoming budget process unless the board wanted to take it out of the cyclical budget process. So today, if the board directed, they could direct me in my role to have this considered as a budget priority or a budget consideration.
Thank you for that response, Ms. Angie. Going last, first I have a question. So let me put you at ease, John Paul, Mr. Bowles. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yes, thank you. You are. Fortunately, it's not Bowles, as was.
Well, let me put you at ease.
That video.
Let me put you at ease. Okay. I think the asks that you're making are perfectly reasonable. Okay. Quick question for you. You reminded me, and I was grateful for it, that the trail extent is 87 miles. Associated with that, I need the reminder of how many of those 87 miles are planned within Washington County? 25. Okay, thank you. It's not conditional. Don't worry, I'm not using that as a proportional amount or anything like that. I am blessed with having the experience of, as a Metro councilor, forming up the Intertwine Alliance, having the opportunity of a lot of experience with the Metro Partners in Nature program, that in terms of building those opportunities for community-based organizations, people of color, to gain experience in nature, we as governments have to invest. It's not just about places, but it's about having the program dollars, that capacity building to provide for those experiences. So I'm sure you're engaging with both the Intertwine Alliance as well as the Metro Partners and harvesting all of that, particularly with regard to equity. Also, you're probably already aware, and I don't mean to belabor the point, with Clean Water Services and their Tree for All program, that has certainly provided a lot of great stewardship opportunities. And Diane Taniguchi-Dennis is our CEO, and Bruce Roll has tremendous experience as part of CWS for that. As I've mentioned, you're making a perfectly reasonable ask, okay? So from my standpoint, as one of five, essentially what I am comfortable saying is I have a soft commit for this, but we need to do some further work on our proposed budget to get to that firm or hard commit. My colleagues and Ms. Angie have already heard this from me, but just so that you know where I'm coming from, we have a major capital project with our WACA building that is over budget. We'll be hearing more about that in the month of March. And so we have reserves, so we'll probably able to work our way through it, but that affects other things. With the state budget cutbacks given COVID and the economic recession, we have reductions to shared revenues provided to Washington County to meet the needs of our vulnerable population. And I expect that to continue. It's been impacting us in the current budget year, we've got at least 2 more years in the new biennium ahead of us before the economists are projecting the full upswing of the economic recovery. So what I hope we will do as a county with our current programs and capital needs is, given that gulf with the county funding, we're going to need to bridge our own programs, so that we keep our own staff on, that we keep those services available to the vulnerable members of our communities, so we don't backslide and cause more harm, let alone advance service coverage to address community need, which we have more community need here than we have invested in to date. And of course, we also have long delayed community transitions and investments in our own county enterprise and infrastructure, everything from our own website, our own cultural competency training for our workforce. The county has really squeezed as much blood out of that as possible, which is great for the taxpayers here in Washington County, but we're now at the point where systems are breaking down. And it's like having to replace a road versus maintaining it over time. I don't mean to share that for a sob story, to be clear, Mr. Bowles, rather to let you know that we as a board are going to need to continue to work with our county administrator over these next few months with our proposed budget. But I would very much like to see us move forward in making this seed investment of $100,000, as well as the 3 years of $40,000 a year. But we need a little bit of time to figure out how to do that. Does that seem like a reasonable approach?
That is very reasonable and encouraging. Thank you. Again, I know the challenges that you guys and your constituents are facing. Frankly, I stepped into this role mid-March of this year and didn't imagine the landscape that I was stepping into to try to help an organization get off the ground. So I understand firsthand some of these challenges, at least.
Well, thank you for being brave. Thank you for stepping into the role. We do need your leadership, your experience, and more importantly, your passion to move forward on this. Ms. Angie, do you think it's reasonable if we can just get a basic thumbs up today to see if commissioners have an interest in a soft commitment, and then continue to work with you through the budget process to firm it up? Okay, so first I see Ms. Angie shaking her head, and I see at least 4 thumbs up for a soft commit at this point, and we'll continue to move forward with a firmer commit through our proposed budget. I think that's really the best outcome we can come to today. Colleagues, any other thoughts?
I'd just like to say thank you, Chair and John Paul, for giving us this information. Chair, for you taking the lead on that. And I look forward to next steps of success.
And I know I'm going to count on Commissioner Willie as our liaison to stay connected, not only with STIA, but also to the foundation, so that as this moves forward, maybe in the second half, we can get an update. It could be just an email to say what's up and going from there. And I know that Commissioner Willie will continue to work with Ms. Angie so that we all have clarity on that. Does that sound good?
Thank you all so much, Commissioner Willie. I will send a follow-up note and look forward to talking soon.
Great. Stay healthy. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have one more item for today's work session. And it is the 2021-2024 Disability Aging and Veteran Services Area Plan. So Rebecca Miller, I'm so pleased to see you again. You've been doing awesome work. Where is she? I don't see her. Oh, we're early.
She's coming over right now, Madam Chair.
Oh,
Yes.
Hello, good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Board. Oh, can you hear me? You guys can
hi,
hear
Marty.
me. Hello. So good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Board. I don't see Rebecca yet, but I think she's going to be.
She's here.
Oh, okay, great. Maybe I just can't see her. So Rebecca Miller is the manager for our Disability Aging and Veterans Program. And Eva Haas, I believe, is also with Rebecca today for this presentation. And I just wanted to introduce them and let you know this is a full year's worth of work that Rebecca, her committee, the advisory council that she leads, the Aging Veterans and Disability Advisory Council that she leads. It is a full year's worth of work, and I remember participating in it 4 years ago when because it takes about a year before the plan's ready for your adoption, and it was a lot of work then. And this team has done it during the COVID year. So I just wanted to frame that and let you know how incredibly proud I am of the team and what they've learned and the plan that they're going to be sharing with you today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rebecca and Eva.
Thanks, Marnie. Appreciate that introduction. It's very kind of you. So Rebecca Miller, Supervisor for Disability, Aging, and Veteran Services, and Eva's going to introduce herself as well.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Eva Haas. I'm a research and evaluation analyst working in the director's office, and one of my roles is to get to support fund projects like this around data collection and community engagement. So glad to be here to share a little bit more this afternoon.
Thanks, Eva. I'm glad you're here to help today and all your work throughout the year. So we did build in time for questions throughout, so there are several pauses that we'll make and ask for questions at that time. So I think we have an hour, and if we can make it faster, we will, but there's a lot of information to get through. So you can go to the next slide, please. So the area plan is a requirement under the Older Americans Act, which is one of our primary funding sources here for these services. The way the structure is lined out is given to us by the state. There are 16 area agencies on aging across Oregon, and all of our plans feed into the state area plan that gets submitted to the federal government. So it's all this very interconnected network of services. The nice thing about the Older Americans Act, a piece of legislation that's been around from 1965, and it's a beautiful piece of legislation for the wonks in the room if you ever want to look at it. It's really about providing local responses to services. So it's services are set out at the federal level and then pass through the state, but then we get a say at the local level what our community needs are and what the strengths are and how we leverage those. So the planning period for this, the implementation period is July 2021 to June 30, 2025. And then we update the plan on an annual basis. So like I said before, it's really guided by the community needs assessment, and which is what Eva's going to get to tell us about here shortly. So next slide, please. So I just wanted to give you an overview of the structure of the plan because it's a large document, and just to highlight a couple areas for you, the table of contents is a great place to go to get a little more detail and figure out what parts you might want to really focus on. But the first section is really about the vision, values, the planning process, and what we're prioritizing in our funding. You'll also find information about the demographics of the county and older adults in particular, the populations we're choosing to focus on, the information about how we deliver services, as well as any gaps we've found in our system, and then how we might coordinate outside our organization, because that's really the role of the Area Agency on Aging, as a coordinating point to leverage. We can't provide all the services to all the people, but we can leverage those resources and the knowledge that we have of working with older adults, people with disabilities, and veterans. The section C, those focus area goals and objectives, that's the heart of the plan, like the stepwise approach. Today, I'm just going to go over the goals, but you can read in and dig deeper into the year-by-year activities, who's going to do them, and what our measurables are underneath that. The first 6 areas you see on that slide through older Native Americans are given to us by the state, and then we can choose to add, as an area agency on aging, based on our services or the local needs, additional areas to focus on. So we've chosen to add veterans, well, and that was in the previous plans. And then we added this year for our plan, the social isolation and loneliness. The next section, is really about specific service definitions and how we deliver service and make determinations around those, who we contract with, what's directly provided by staff, and what's provided in contracts. And then area plan budget, I just want to note that it's really more of a report on a budget than a budget, because we're still in budgeting. We talk about units of service, and it's really more of a kind of a map. So it's a great overview of who we are, but it is not a budget per se. And then the appendices, draw attention within the appendices is an opportunity for us to describe our and report on our last 4 years accomplishments. So you can dig into that appendices and find lots of information, but that's one thing you might want to take a look at to see how we did over the previous planning period. So I'm going to pause there before we do the next slide. Any questions so far? Okay, next slide, please. So a little bit about the needs assessment. It was guided by our Aging and Veteran Services Advisory Council Steering Committee. Commissioner Willie is on that as a liaison to the board. He's also attended some of our presentations on this and been hearing about it throughout the course of the year. But in late 2019, we convened 4 steering committee meetings. And that group consisted of advisory council members, staff, community-based partners, and any folks who would have some say and influence in who we were going to talk to for doing our needs assessment, what that process would look like, what are our data collection tools. So we had a great plan together with a plan to get started with focus groups and a survey, and then COVID hit. We paused and we said, what do we do? How do we move forward? At the time, the state said you have an additional 6 months. They extended our deadline. So we did an equity assessment and said, what would be the burden or the benefit of moving forward right now with our area plan, with the needs assessment? And we determined that it's good time to go forward because we are receiving in some CARES dollars into Dave's through our Older Americans Act contracts. And we want to know what's happening in the community and where the needs are and how to fund those money. So we thought it could do 2 purposes if we were to do that. So we moved forward, but we added a couple questions to help us tease that out a bit. And then we worked with our community-based partners who we'd contracted with for for focus groups. And they agreed that they wanted to go forward and that they would do interviews with key informants instead of focus groups. So we did a pivot and moved forward. Another important thing to know is that we wanted to avoid any duplications of effort, surveys that had already been done, information by folks. Like we weren't going to ask about housing because housing is going to be reaching out about that. Transportation, we might ask our role in transportation, but we're not going to dive deep into that area. So we tried to remove anything that was already done to avoid that duplication. So that is, and I would also say we started by looking at the leading with race report for Washington County, reviewing the community health improvement plan and really trying to build on and leverage what was already known about the community. And I think it's next slide, and Eva.
Great, thank you. So before we dive into what we learned from the needs assessment, I just wanted to share a little bit more about what our community looks like. So Disability, Aging, and Veteran Services focuses on older adults, people with disabilities, and then veterans of any age. And so I wanted to share just what what does that look like in our community? So in Washington County, we have somewhere in the ballpark of 572 to 600 and some odd residents. There's a few different measurements of that in the communities, but somewhere around 600,000. About 20% or 19% are over the age of 60, and almost 10% are over the age of 85. And that population, you may have heard of this, but is growing and will continue to grow really, really quickly. So that chart you can see there is showing what the proposed population growth is in different sectors of the population. So the blue bar is the total population expected growth, and the orange is our older adult population. So we've been talking about this for a while. We know that the baby boomer generation is going to really make a big impact in our older adult population soon, and that's coming sooner than we think. So it's very, very important, of course, to keep this population in mind as we go through. Right now, our older adult population is overall less diverse than our general population, but that again is going to shift pretty dramatically in the near future. And we'll dive down a little bit deeper into that on the next slide. About 10% of our population overall experiences some sort of disability. We also know that that increases proportionally with age. We do see a greater proportion of our American Indian and Alaska Native residents experience a disability compared to the rest of our population. 7% overall of our population are veterans, and 45% of our veteran population are older adults, and about a third have served in the Vietnam era. And Washington County is home to one of the youngest veteran populations in the state. And Rebecca will talk, I think, more about that when we get to the veteran section later on. Oh, next slide, please. So this is diving down a little bit deeper into our demographics. So what you're seeing here is 3 different ways of looking at that. So that black bar is the total population by race or ethnicity. The blue bar is what that looks like in our older adult populations, our populations ages 65 and over. And then that cream-ish bar is looking at the percent of our residents over the age of 65 who live in poverty. So before we go down deeper into that, what you can just generally see is that our older adult population is slightly less diverse racially and ethnically than our total population. But again, that is changing. The other point I wanted to make here is that when we talk about older adults, I think it's really tempting to say that's one population, but we know that that's not a homogeneous population. So the needs of older adults in the 65-year range are very different than the needs of the older adults in 80 or 85. We also know that the needs of our dominant culture older adults are much different than our non-dominant culture older adults. So just keeping that in mind as we look at these data, I think are really helpful. One other thing that really struck us as stark is as we were analyzing these data and looking in that percent of poverty over the age of 65, what disparities we see among our communities of color who may not have a large proportion of folks in our community, but of those population groups, a lot are living in poverty. And I think specifically among our Black or African American residents, our American Indian or Alaska Native residents, there we have 19% and almost 12% living in poverty for our older adult populations, which is of particular interest as Rebecca and her team go through thinking how to plan programs, how to design folks to meet this growing need of older adults who may not have access to as many resources or have access to resources that are in their language, culture, or chosen identity. Okay, next slide, please. So this is looking a little at our survey respondents. So this is comparing essentially this cycle of needs assessment to our previous cycle of needs assessment. So we were able to expand the language translation for paper and online survey from 2 languages to 8 languages, which is really pretty exciting for us. We started from using the safe harbor languages and used input from our community partners who really work with our populations of interest. This is in the area plan, so spoiler alert, but the languages spoken by our total population that are not English aren't necessarily the same for our older adult population. So we need to make sure that the languages we were providing made sense for the populations we were trying to reach. We were able to increase our participation from our focus populations in no small part by our community partners, really helping us reach the populations, tell us how we should be asking the questions, and really guiding the whole process from start to finish, which was really an amazing process to be involved in. Not always do we get to plan this so carefully. And so it's been a really big honor to work with Rebecca and her team on this vision for how do we do this as thoughtfully as we can, and moving away from that sort of transactional relationship between our community partners. So that was very exciting. We almost doubled our responses and got a little bit more differences in our response back. One thing I do want to highlight is, it may not seem very exciting, but we got 1 in 2 female respondents this time versus 2 and 3 last time, which for surveys is pretty radical. Typically we see in the 70 to 90% coming back from people who identify as female. So having about 50% population or respondents who identify as male is nice. It's very broadening of our demographics. Other things I wanted to highlight here is getting the participation back. In one way was sending out direct mail and having stamped envelopes to turn back those surveys in people's preferred language. So that really helped. You don't have to read English to be able to respond to that survey. Direct outreach with our community partners to homebound individuals through library and meal delivery. And we're going to be working on continuing to disaggregate these data whenever we can as we move forward. We'll show one example of what that looks like. But we have a really rich response here, and we're not quite done analyzing those and planning out those programs. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay, I think this one's mine, but please fill in if I forget something, Eva.
Sure.
So we asked, what are the top 5 services? There was a list we provided of those services that we provide. We tried to use non-jargony language, which can be really challenging, as you all are aware. And we asked both, what are the most important services to you that we do provide? And then we also had a category of, these are the services we don't provide, but of these, what's important to you? These are categories of services that we can connect folks to, but don't directly provide ourselves. And the reason we did that was it was an educational opportunity for us to share all the richness of services we offer, but also provide that tools like, here's some other things you might be interested in. We can connect you, but we don't provide them directly. So this was of all participants of the survey. These are the things they said that were important. They also could write in other. So there was always an opportunity for a write-in category. And again, if they responded in a language other than English, we had those translated and have that information. So this helped us to prioritize services, but also gave us some awareness of what people were aware of and what they weren't. So that also helps frame our educational components as we move forward. The other thing that did is it helped, we had removed questions that we weren't going to use. If we're asking you for your income, but we're not going to use it for anything because our services aren't income based, let's not ask that question. So we kind of scrubbed some of those things out. Same with marital status and those sorts of questions that we felt were potentially invasive that we didn't want to ask. So anyways, those are things I wanted to highlight. So these are the categories that people said they were most interested in. And then the next slide, Eve is going to go into, we were able to disaggregate that and look by population, which will help us further fine tune our services. Next slide, please.
Next slide, please. Oh. Yeah, so this is looking at that table that we saw from the last slide, but showing the top 5 services by respondent category. And so you can see there that really yields different top services. So it's just one example of things where we're diving down deeper into the data that we have available to us. One thing I want to draw your attention to on this particular table is looking at that caregiver category. So those are people who identified as providing care for another person, however they define that. So you can see there on the bottom, help caring for a family member or friend, or support for me as a caregiver were one of the top services that were important that were provided by Dave's. which I think makes logical sense. And we were excited to see that as a piece of really internal data validation as well. So we expected to see that, and we saw that. So that gives us more, hope is the wrong word, but we feel better about those other data
Confidence?
because we saw that resulted in this table. And so as we use these going forward, it'll help for any of these programs that are already in existence, who said that was a top service provided to them, and can we make sure that that is provided equitably and accessing folks who need that. Okay. Are there any questions so far? Because I'm going to just dive into a couple more data slides, and I wanted to take a pause. No. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. So this was one of the 2 questions that we added in response to COVID-19. And it really was necessary. Access to technology, of course, is always important, but really became essential and vital overnight, sometime in the mid-March range. We wanted to assess our community's needs on accessing and using technology, comfort with technology, if people had the ability to pay for that at home, or what that looked like in our community. We hadn't really done that before. We also wanted to know if there were any differences in the same particular populations that we looked at before. So you can see here about the very first response there is, I have a computer or smartphone and internet access at home. So for the most part, about half of respondents in any category said that yes, they have that at home. And then there were some differences in who needs support to participate in online programming, in particular caregivers and people who identify as a person of color. The other thing to keep in mind is this survey was available in both online and on paper, and there was assistance to take that over the phone. So it wasn't like we were sampling if people had access to technology on technology, right? So we had ability to pull in all respondents to that. So people weren't comfortable using technology to fill out the survey. We had other methods for them to do so. So I think it was just really a good baseline assessment. I think asking this going forward would really help us to know where we're at, and for planning programming, right? So all of a sudden, all of our programming became online, and we know that some people engage better than others in that. So I think going forward, this may be something we pick back up for just checking in with different subgroups. Yes, go ahead, Chair.
One of the things that I learned through an association with a friend of mine who helps coordinate and provide ESL, English as a Second Language training, is thankfully through the CRF funding through the city of Portland, there were many folks who can participate in different means using their smartphone, but there are limitations. They can have that one-on-one Zoom experience or that one-on-one FaceTime, but when moving to a community group, multi-person Zoom with breakout rooms, that's where they really needed Chromebooks or needed to move to a broadband capability as opposed to just their cellular service. So I've learned a lot about that need, and just wanted to share that here, because in the second category, this is where there's some sensitivity there. Are we talking about that one-on-one kind of experience or more that communal? It really begins to stretch the boundaries there. So I just wanted to share that, but I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this, this data presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think if we ask this today, it might look a little bit different. And I think we've learned so much over the year on how people engage. So thank you for sharing that. I think that helps us think through that more.
Actually,
Okay,
Eva, if you don't mind,
go ahead.
I'll just make two quick comments here. One is
Please.
family caregivers that ordinarily had a real challenge getting out of the house with their care recipient have been able to access services at a greater amount. So we hope to be able to continue that going forward, kind of both, be able to do both online and in person. But the other thing is we received some additional funding for technology access. So we are able to help, we've been working with community centers through the long-term care ombudsman for long-term care facilities, and then as well as individuals. So we have a contract where we can send a person out to help someone not only set up a device, but purchase a device and learn how to use it. So it's been amazing. Funds are available right now, so call.
Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and this is another question we added to get at where people were feeling in how they thought things were going to be. Now, I think it was a very tumultuous time when the survey went out. I want to say April. I'm looking at Rebecca because I don't remember exactly when we had this in the field, but it was over
later.
the summer.
It was a little later.
A little over, okay.
Yeah.
So sometime over the spring, summer, when things were very tumultuous everywhere. And we wanted to see how people were feeling about their health and whether or not they thought that they were going to be better or worse overall in the future, just generally. And this became more critical, I think, after we were asking people to stay at home. And we know, and of course I know as an epidemiologist, that really had a dramatic change on disease transmission. But we also know it had a dramatic impact on people's mental, behavioral, and emotional health that we're really only beginning to think about the future of. And so it's really important to think about that, I think, as well. One other thing we noticed in the key interviews that we'll talk about just in a minute was this disruption in natural supports when we asked people to stay at home to save lives, right? So people, neighbors would check on them, or their children or their grandchildren or whatever that looked like. And when we asked people to stay at home to stop disease transmission, that really interrupted that as well. And we even saw that among people who are already linked into services, really feeling that loss, that social support loss. Interestingly, for these data, most say their health and well-being will be the worse or about the same in the future. But of all of the subgroups that we analyzed, we saw communities of color, so people identified as a person of color, were more optimistic about their health and well-being in the future. I think as we continue to look at this, or if we were to re-survey folks about their future outlook, I wonder if that would look a little bit different. But this is another piece we added to that. Okay, next slide, please. So Rebecca talked about this at the beginning, but we had a very robust plan for in-person focus groups where we were going to hear from a lot of different communities. We had contracted or had started the contracting process for different community-based organizations. And it was pretty apparent pretty quickly that was not going to happen safely. So we pivoted to doing these key participant interviews. We were able to hear from 90 individuals, which is pretty exciting. Having a more one-on-one conversation, which is of course a little bit different than the data you would get from a focus group where people can build on each other's thoughts and ideas, but it really was the best thing we could do at the time. So there were contracted organizations, Central Cultural, ERCO, and Asian Health and Service Center in multiple languages and cultures to hear from different residents. The focus here was hearing from people who we wouldn't have heard from in other ways through some traditional data collection. And we identified several themes. And I've listed them here. I'm just going to read a couple of points under each theme, and then we can have a little bit more conversation about that. So the first one was community identity and community needs. So most of our participants were satisfied with their community and the way the community has worked together during the global crisis. These were really meaningful for me to read through because people really had that sense of optimism. But we also heard from multiple members of our Asian community, particularly concerns of discrimination, racism, and ageism. So while we had a lot of positivity, enthusiasm about their community, we also had the darker side. Social connectedness and social isolation. We've talked about this a little bit. We already knew that that was a key need in particularly the older adult community going into the needs assessment, but it really became very, very apparent during the analysis of this. We knew that participants were socially isolated by design in some ways, but losing that social connectedness is a really big impact on people's emotional health. And so thinking through how do we engage people in a different way. Participants also noted feeling socially isolated by living alone, language barriers, lack of transportation, and fear of discrimination. So lots of really key things to bring forward into programming. Barriers in accessing services, lack of knowledge and awareness, which is really helpful to know as you're going through and planning programs. How do we explain those wider, or how do people share those so that folks are aware of the services, the great services that are available? Other barriers were stigma, ageism, fear of discrimination, cultural competency. So we heard a lot about this where maybe the service was available, but it didn't connect well enough to somebody's culture or identity. And so thinking through how to adjust that when we can, or explain that when we can't. Some of the more challenging barriers were Medicare, legal aid, and navigating government bureaucracy, which I think is a challenge for a lot of our community members. Aging in place is another key theme that we learned about. So people really want to stay in their community as they age in their homes, if at all possible. So thinking through how to provide that for folks or be able to share that service. Affordable housing, of course, accessible and stable housing, especially considering the rising housing costs and lack of supportive services in our community in particular. Issues of living with chronic conditions and disabilities. We talked at the beginning about how the proportion of populations experiencing a disability increases as we age. And so that just adds another layer of needing that supportive and safe housing. And of course, COVID-19. That was a key piece that came out of almost every piece of data collection. I'm sure that it will be this major piece of data collection we'll hear in any sort of anything for the next few years. Participants in particular noted challenges with social cohesion because they really recognize that need for physical distancing, but losing that lack of social support. One thing I also thought was interesting within this theme is talking about rumors or fake news. So wanting to hear what the truth is from a trusted source, and that Dave's was that trusted source, which is nice to know and to be able to share that with folks. Okay. Great. Any questions on anything so far before I turn it back over to Rebecca?
I don't have any questions. I was able to read portions of the document, but not the whole thing that I want yet. So I'll be pursuing that. But one of the things that struck me and reminded me, and I had an opportunity to chat with Commissioner Fye yesterday, as I had read this document, I was reminded that I hadn't quite followed up on learning and a topic through our affordable housing bond projects, but the need to continue to work with our diverse community members and community-based organizations really highlights this, and that is the need for us to ensure that these CBOs that you and the departments have been working with, ERCO, APANO, right, multiple ones, that we are building out community spaces for them to be hosted here physically in Washington County, because many of them still have their base of operation out in Multnomah County. We do have a critical mass of population here in Washington County, and we're going to need to start ensuring that in those mixed-use affordable housing complexes, we create space for them to have these community-based organizations hosted in particular sites. I know we did this at Metro through an ETOD program out in the Jade District, and they're doing it again with African youth. And I wasn't proactive enough in making sure to raise that during the Affordable Housing Bond NOFA, but I think we have to recognize the learnings through what you've done here and really build on that. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. I actually had the opportunity to provide a couple letters of support for some Northwest housing alternatives applications in for some of those dollars, one for LGBT specific community space for older adults, and one for Latino community members, and one for veterans community members. So I wholeheartedly agree it's a gap, and we have a great opportunity as we build this out to provide that sense of belonging and safety and a place to go. So I think next slide, Eva. Okay, before I get into the goals, just another opportunity for any questions about the needs assessment. I'll say quickly too, under each of these issue areas, we talk specifically about the needs that arose around that issue area. So, or tried to when we could, and we had some specific data. And then of course we used the data to develop the goals and objectives and all the activities here. So just a quick pause, any more? Okay, I wanted to just take the chance to also to say thank you and acknowledge the community partners. So we had ERCO, Asian Health and Service Center, SAGE Metro Portland that works through Friendly House, Central Cultural, Leofa. They met them through one of the EOC, the stand-up testing, the pop-up testing events, and got some surveys completed through support with them. Through the tribal members, we had community health workers out getting surveys. So just a huge community effort. And then again, to all the participants who took the time to do this and complete it. And then of course, to all the staff who spent time to develop the plan. So this is definitely a huge team effort and a big lift. So, and thanks to Eva and Amy Baker for kicking us off back in the early days. So it's definitely a group effort. The goals here that I'm going to read, like I said, that we go in deeper in the area plan. There are objectives. So the goals are meant to be sort of evergreen, 4 years, somewhat aspirational, and then we dig in a little deeper into what's measurable. And we do update every year, but when we update, we'll likely update objectives and tasks, not overarching goals. That we've written a good goal if we don't update it in the 4-year period, except for maybe just flesh something out or something new comes on the horizon. And let's see if there's anything else I wanted to say about that. The challenge in writing goals this year for a 4-year plan, I wish we'd been able to write a 1-year or a 2-year plan and then come back. So we really front loaded our activities and made some guesses. So I assume we'll have more updates than usual as we go through our planning period. We did have a focus on equity and improvements in our ability to serve Black, Indigenous, and people of color, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans people, people experiencing language barriers. And then also newly added this year is really a focus on serving the needs of people aging with HIV and AIDS in our community. Really wanted to also just highlight the focus of working with the community and our trusted partners and the opportunity that COVID has provided in making new friends and alliances with folks who've been doing this work out in the community for a long time, but us getting entrees to them and building relationships. So we have a commitment to go back to, I have a commitment to go back to the community over the years that follow in the months, it would be sharing information over the years and implementing and improving on our plans. So just wanted to say that before I go in to some of these. I'll just hit some highlights and feel free to ask questions at any time. So at the next slide, please. So we run the Aging and Disability Resource Connection, also known as the ADRC. This is our way in the front door. It's a phone line that's available for folks to call with people answering the phone and providing information and referral to services. We make warm transfers to other organizations and partner with those, like for instance, if you want Medicaid or Social Security, or you're looking for housing, we're a connecting point. We can get you across the county, across the state, the services that you need and get access to that. So our goal here is really to increase the visibility of that service as a front door to other services, rather than people having to call 5 places to get to the right place. They can call us once and hopefully we can provide them those list of resources. So we'd like to see an increase in utilization by those focus populations I mentioned early on. With increasing capacity without additional funding, the challenge there is how do we focus on our core and make sure it's quality service that we're providing as we reach new folks, maybe people that are experiencing language barriers or from cultures that are different than our staff. How do we make sure we're providing a really high level of service and continuing on the right path in that direction? So we've played a role in and asking people calling us around the pandemic for services, and then we're getting a lot of calls around vaccines. So we are seen as a place where people can get information, and we'll continue to be a coordinating point. I'll just leave it there for this one, and we can go to the next slide. For nutrition services, this is really about increasing capacity to provide an equitable nutrition program. So we contract out for both congregate, which is group-based meals, think of through senior centers or community centers, as well as home-delivered meals. One of the major changes we'll be making in our next contracting period, in our next RFPQ, is dividing the home-delivered meals and the congregate meal into 2 separate procurement processes. In the past, it was one, which essentially locked out many organizations from being able to apply. So we will have a home delivered meal RFPQ as well as a congregate meal RFPQ. So we hope to open up to new community-based partners who would like to be able to provide a convening location for folks where they can provide other services and build on that work. So Meals on Wheels people, ERCO, are our current providers. They do an amazing job, and we couldn't have, couldn't get through this without their services. And there are many other players out there that I think are interested in providing meals. And through the pandemic, we've seen more of the network and have been plugged into more of that food pantry network that Dave's wasn't previously working with. And we see a path to do that now, which is pretty exciting. So you'll see that reflected in our plan. Let's see what else I want to say about that. I think that touches it. We did stop congregate meals in March, and we haven't reopened, and we don't know when that's going to happen. We assume it's going to take a long time for people to come back. Hopefully maybe by fall, we'll see that. But we know congregate meal sites are way more than, and same with home delivered meals, they're far more than a meal. They are a connecting point. They're social, they're providing a place of belonging and access to other services. It's laying eyeballs on people and making sure they are safe, right? It's really important. Okay, next slide. So health promotion, this is a very specific, spelled out in the Older Americans Act and by the state as evidence-based health promotion. So it's a very specific category of service. We did receive a cut from the state of the state provided funding for evidence-based health promotion last funding cycle. So we only have federal funds for this. It's a fairly small amount. So we really want to leverage those dollars in a very targeted fashion to address the community needs that we saw reflected in the needs assessment. So looking at where those health disparities are. So we'll be looking at funding master trainings and then doing an RFP process to have the community and community-based organizations that are working in those focus populations to be able to deliver services like chronic disease self-management, maybe positive self-management for people aging with HIV, Tomando for folks that are speak Spanish, etc. So next slide. So family caregivers, as I mentioned earlier, this is an area where we can provide a lot of different services. The needs have increased about 20% through the pandemic, or at least the people contacting us. With the closure of adult day centers, the loss of natural supports and interruption just to the network of support that helps family caregivers has really caused a disruption. On the bright side, we have been able to offer services online, reaching some different folks. So we think there's a nice combination, and we've been able to provide services in other languages through partnerships. So we hope to continue on that path. The only way to increase capacity with limited funding is really to look at other ways of delivering the service. So we want to use volunteers. So we're going to be looking at how we can mobilize volunteers in the community to support other caregivers or to support caregivers. So once we can increase the capacity and we look through an equity lens of what do we have stood up, then we're going to look at about getting the word out to the community in a broad way. So we will also really let folks know that family, the definition of family is an inclusive term. So we have chosen family here. We can help support grandparents that are raising grandchildren. It's really about serving the needs of a caregiver, also people serving folks with dementia and other cognitive impairments. We provide a respite care for folks. We provide self-directed care, so they might get a stipend to go purchase something for their to help aid in the care of their loved one. And we've been contracting with Asian Health and Service Center for about 7 years on these. They provide information referral, caregiver training. So we have a model that has worked for and is working for culturally specific services. And then we also provide these in-house. So next slide. Legal assistance and elder rights protection. So this is kind of two-pronged. It's really about increasing public awareness of elder abuse. We provide trainings to the public and folks that have regular interaction with older adults to recognize the signs of abuse, neglect, self-neglect, financial abuse and fraud, and then how to turn those in and get somebody to check out the situation. So we don't do the investigation, but we might refer that to adult protective services, and then come in with services and supports to stabilize that person and increase their safety. We also have contracts with the law center to they can have a free consultation and are often referred for additional pro bono work. So promoting the use of this in those focus populations is going to be one of our key goals in the next year. It is a contract, so we have some ability to work with them to identify their lawyers. They're looking for more and bringing on more of their pro bono lawyers that are bilingual, multilingual, multicultural. So that'll be one of the focuses. One gap that remains that for you all to be aware of is a lack of a public guardian in Washington County. The guardianship is a very extreme, it's a far end, it's really the removal of rights of the individual. So the gap also exists is those steps leading up to that, or that could have helped avoid that, is how do we help families with the tools that they need in order to help support their loved one. So that's a gap that still exists, and always open to thinking on that together. Support with estates and wills and powers of attorney and things like that are outside of the scope of the Older Americans Act, so it's a gap. Okay, next slide. So older Native Americans, through the Older Americans Act, there's something called Title VI, and this is funding that goes directly to the federally recognized tribes. For Washington County, that is Siletz and Grand Ronde. So as an area agency on aging, we're tasked with working together with tribes and have been doing so through statewide meet and greets pre-pandemic, and then the pandemic hit, and a lot of our ability to sort of do planning together has just ceased while folks are trying to survive and they're trying to support their communities to survive. So this is a draft. We have permission from the state to kind of pause on this while we all get our feet back underneath us and start that planning. Relationship is really important here, and working in consultation and partnership. So we have a 3-county partnership. So Multnomah, Clackamas, Washington County, as well as state partners at Aging and People with Disabilities, NARA, NAEA, and the 2 tribal entities. And we're all convening and talking about what's next. But ultimately the goal is, you know, we have 1% of the population identifying in this category, but over 11% of people over 65 experience poverty. There's a lot of disparities to address together. So more to come on that one, and you can still read. We put a lot of information in there, but it's just a placeholder for now. Next slide. And I just have 2 more slides. So veterans, the Veterans Program is not funded through the Older Americans Act, through County General Fund and a grant from Oregon, not a grant, but through lottery funds through ODVA, Oregon Department of Veterans Affairs. We fund a veterans program to basically help connect veterans to the services they've earned, they're entitled to as veterans in the community, as well as their caregiver or their loved ones, their family members. So we want to increase the reach. We've assisted roughly 1/3 of the veterans that reside in Washington County, which is, I think, fairly remarkable. It's we're number 2 in the state in terms of the amount of veterans we're reaching. In terms of younger veterans, we're number 1. We just got our numbers, so we're pretty excited about that. We fall just behind Multnomah County in a lot of those categories in terms of our reach. So our focus on here is really around Gulf era veterans, LGBTQ veterans, women, and Black, Indigenous, and veterans of color in the community to get them connected to benefits, as well as our suicide prevention work. And next slide. So this is another one. This is what we added, one of the ones we added this year, really addressing loneliness. As Eva mentioned, loneliness is not a new thing, or isolation is not a new thing for older adults. I think for the first time, what we have is a broader community understanding the impacts of that. And there are some very, when the pandemic's over, there are some very important things we can use this opportunity to like highlight that in the community, so people have some relationship, because until you've been there, it's really hard for people to kind of get their head wrapped around what that means. So barriers in transportation, loss and grief, stigma or fear of having racist or homophobic remarks out when people are going to maybe community centers or other places that don't feel welcoming. So to your point, Catherine or Chair Harrington, about those spaces that feel welcoming. So those are important steps to addressing isolation. So pre-pandemic, 1/3 of people reported loneliness and 1/4 were considered isolated pre-pandemic, just to give you an idea of the scale. It's something to address through awareness building of community centers and the general public in other planning efforts when talking about transportation, when talking about housing, all our built environment things. Having older adults represented in those groups or advocates represented is really important. But then educating and providing opportunities for family members and just people in the community. So providing tech access, getting classes online. Those are all things we're working on and we'll continue to do in partnership through our Older Adult Behavioral Health Initiative, which is that program that's funded through our behavioral health. We have a staff member in behavioral health and a staff member over here in aging through a specific grant through the Oregon Health Authority. And all this work aligns with the CHIP committee. They've actually, one of the CHIP committees changed their name to be focused on connection in the community. So it's a really nice dovetail with our that HHS wide work. One of the things that we're going to be funding in the next 4 years, I actually put in funding in my budget last year, but because of the pandemic, we weren't able to use it. I'm going to carry that forward, add some more, and we'll have a pool of money to start funding a service called Recreation, which is an Older Americans Act area of service where you can fund cultural events, just community events. So the idea would be to have community partners receive funding to provide events that make a difference for them, that can help convene people to create that sense of community. So that'll be something we start next fiscal year, or as soon as the pandemic gives us a minute to do that.
Rebecca,
yes,
and Chair Harrington, I just wanted to interrupt for a second. We've mentioned a couple of times the CHIP committee, and I just wanted to let everybody know that's the Community Health Improvement Plan, and it is a committee that has, last I heard, like 70 some participants from different organizations across Washington County that are working to address public health issues, and there's a lot of overlap with the work that we're doing in the aging program and the veterans program, as well as behavioral health. So it's not, I just wanted to say what CHIP was, and it's based on a community health needs assessment that happens every 3 years in Washington County. So it really aligns nicely with this assessment that really focuses on the needs of the aging community. So just wanted to add that really quickly because we've mentioned it a couple times.
Thanks, Barney. And actually, it's perfect. I was going to pause right here at it's questions, and then I was just going to talk about next steps. So I would welcome your comments. Thank you for hearing us today and for your support. So questions or comments?
I'm actually going to hold my own questions and comments until you go over the area plan approval, the last slide.
Okay, sure. So next slide. So we'll be before you on the 23rd. I'll be before you on the 23rd, and we'll be asking for a vote to approve the area plan. So in November, we brought the goals and objectives to the public. We took comments at that time, made some modifications, and then we had a public comment period from January 5th to 31st. We went to our advisory council on January 19th. That was one of the opportunities to give comment in a meeting. So that's, our public process has been throughout. It's really been integrated throughout, but those are some of the formal opportunities we gave for comment. So what will happen is after today, if there's any comments or areas you'd like to see fleshed out a little bit more or more clarification on, we can make those adjustments to the area plan. We'll come back to the board on the 23rd. I said consent agenda, but it's actually an action item asking for your vote of approval. We'll submit to the state. They'll come back with any corrections or clarifications from us. And then once it's approved in sometime between June and the first part of, well, June, really. I don't know how quick they'll turn around once we get our corrections to them. Then we begin implementation. So those are the next steps. We also will be sharing our data out. Eva's got some plans for that. And my goal would be to get the final goals and objectives translated, get some infographics out, and start doing a roadshow to different partners and organizations to go back to the community and share with them our plans and get them connected and informed about what we're up to.
So in terms of this area plan approval process, community services and supports unit equals the state.
Correct. They're aging and people with disabilities.
Great, great. Commissioners, questions and comments? Go ahead, Commissioner Willie.
Well, there was just a lot of information here, but I'm sure, Rebecca, that you have processed through this, so you've got this all on at your fingertips there. But for me, it was good information to hear. I hadn't heard a lot of the statistical data, especially about the polling that you did and the demographics that you communicated there. if I could go back a couple of slides, just a second. I'm doing this. I've got this on my laptop. The one in regards to older Native Americans, you said that this was an additional service that you're looking into, and you're still working through that. Is that what you were saying?
Sorry, no. So we are still working on the plan, going through the details of the plan. So this is a draft goal, and what you see in the plan is a draft, because it's we want to really work together with those tribal partners and organizations serving folks that identify as, as Native American in the community. So the plan, that section of the plan is draft, because we haven't had a chance to do all the work collaboratively that we were all set to do pre-pandemic. So
Okay.
temporarily, it's not paused. I wouldn't say it's paused, because we've been talking to each other throughout. It's just tri-county. So we're collaborating with Multnomah County on their area plan, Clackamas on theirs, and then the other entities.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Other commissioners? Go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
I appreciate the comprehensive nature of this presentation. There's a lot of information here. And I guess what I wanted to respond to is the isolation piece. I appreciate the information that you provided there. I think that that's really key. And I apologize for my phone interfering here.
Murphy's Law says that's when it rings.
Well, I've had trouble with my internet, and I'm on a different server and all sorts of things today. Now I can't even find you guys. So
thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, well, seeing no other commissioner comments at this, go ahead, Commissioner Rogers.
I would simply echo the comments of everyone else. It's a little overwhelming presentation on an afternoon after a full morning, so it's hard to digest it all. It's too much of a bite. But the only question I have, it's good information, but maybe it's just the occupation I'm in or the professional circles I'm in. There are lots and lots and lots of people who are in your demographic age that you're referring to, who are a little bored. They'd like to be a little active in things. And it's not everybody wants to be a Walmart greeter, nothing wrong with that, but not everybody wants to be. Not everyone wants to work at Lowe's, like across the street from me as a greeter. They have different skill sets that they'd like to use. Is there a way that people can participate? How do we put the word out and say, you have some, and it has to be limited, because nobody wants a schedule. You got to appear certain hours, certain days, but do you have opportunities for service?
Yeah, yes, we do. Part of the challenge is current opportunities are really about, we need you to be committed as a SHIBA volunteer to help people understand Medicare benefits, or we have some volunteer opportunities with our benefits enrollment center, because the nature of our services are, at least the volunteer opportunities I have right now, are really about providing some critical services that are time-based. But that is one of our goals, is looking at how could we use volunteers. Good volunteer management, it does require staffing in order to do that. And we had a program educator position funded that we left unfilled because of the pandemic, because they were also doing outreach. And looking ahead, I don't know that I'm going to be able to fund that. So we're looking at how we might use internal staff to do that right now. So it's a challenge to figure those pieces out. But I agree, there's a lot of great volunteer organizations, and we do make referrals out to other places for people to volunteer, but we'll definitely be exploring our family caregiver is one of those areas that we think we can utilize volunteers to engage, to do a dual purpose. Not only the person who's volunteering gets a benefit, but so does the person receiving whatever it is that that connection that they're getting.
Well, I'll put one little final plug in, and I know Commissioner Willie would know that, because he's a CPA, like I'm a CPA. There's lots of people who are retiring, are doing volunteer work, who have expertise in elder abuse, have expertise in tax planning. They have expertise in estate planning, and their hourly rate is zero. And so that's a very good compared to what they really bill on a daily basis. They're looking for opportunities to do things. They usually join some other organizations, and if you mentioned that in a slide, and Jerry certainly would probably be a good advocate for this sort of thing, but you might consider it because it's a more holistic treatment. People like to go to one-stop shopping because they like to go to one shop stopping. They don't want to have to go to 15 different nonprofit organizations. So yeah, just a thought. If you can't fulfill that, that's not in your wheelhouse, that's okay. But just a thought.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Commissioner Treese, you seem to be unmuted, so I wanted to check if you had something more. It's okay, just shake
No.
your head yes or no.
I'm good, but thank you very much.
Okay, no worries, just checking. You're doing fine, doing fine. Commissioner Fye, unless you have something, I'll go next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have anything. This is a great presentation. I echo what everyone else said.
Great. Alrighty, well, some comments from me. I really appreciate all the work that went into this new full 4-year plan, and I appreciate all of the data that has been gathered and analyzed. Thank you, Eva. I know you've got some super analysis skills there, and I appreciate that. One thing that all of you, and that includes my colleagues, but as well as staff, have heard from me is how do we appreciate what the community need is? And
Sarah.
through, hello? Through the different, the area plan structure, we get a sense of what the different categories are. And you've done a really nice job in this presentation of outlining these goals as you've highlighted here, and then how in the document you're trying to set up different objectives. I'm leading with all of that because where I'm trying to get is, I understand through the budget part of the document, it's not a classical budget, but what you've illustrated is that there's funding that comes from the feds to you directly or through the state, and there's funding from the state. And then we do have some areas, particularly around veterans, you spoke about through general fund funding. And in one of the spreadsheets late in the document, it talks about some local match or general fund use there. What I'm trying to get to is, from my standpoint, my philosophy around all of this is that no one should be forgotten, right? We're all humans. We don't want, if I use an analogy like a berry on a vine or a grape on a vine, we don't want those to just shrivel up. We are people. Our community is made up of people. And that means that we need to care for our most vulnerable community members. You're doing an incredible job of meeting, the need is thus, and you're making some really hard decisions about how to program that, and you're only able to meet a subset of that. I understand that. We also have youth that need to be supported through programs like through our juvenile justice programs. And then, strongly believe in rehabilitation needs, particularly as supported through community correction. So those are 3 really big bucket categories that I use towards addressing community need or summarizing. And so what I'm trying to discern through this voluminous array of information is, how can I better appreciate the need for each of these 8, I believe it is, categories or focus areas. And there are some where you've talked about just using different techniques to try to increase some efficiency in reaching targeted groups. But I'm also trying to understand that if we are to invest in some general fund dollars, and you heard me earlier articulate concern that because of state cutbacks, I don't want fewer people to be served by these existing programs just because the state has budget cutbacks, right? We have capacity building through our own staff as well as through CBOs that I don't want to lose that ground, right? So there's how we might increase our own dollars. And I realize that for decades, this county has said no backfilling, but that means people are being left behind, and we're hurting people by not addressing the needs that they have. And then there are other areas where you, through these different goals, you've identified different objectives, but for the funding. So I'm wondering if you have some like consumer report style tables that take these different focus areas and help me understand what categories, you know, one color that maybe just try new techniques but no new dollars, other ones where we have a need, you know, a different color to signify we've got a backtracking due to lack of funding, another color that indicates that we could meet some additional population needs if we were to provide some more general fund dollars. And I realize what I'm asking for, we may not have the time to put together for this next fiscal budget, right? This next proposed budget. But I do want to try and figure out how we're able to leverage this vast set of data of this area plan and look at that in future years. So I'll turn to both Ms. Angie, Ms. Kyle, Rebecca, and Eva to ask the question, does that information need that I'm asking for, does it make sense? Are you able to understand what I'm trying to get at, the model?
Yes, Chair Harrington, that does make sense. And I can work with the team to further talk about what we have capacity to achieve this year and what do we need to cast forward into future years.
Great, great. Thank you very much for hearing my request. I appreciate it. That's all I have. Do any other commissioners have any last questions or comments? Good job, staff. There's a lot of efforts gone into this, a lot of public engagement, working with partners. I'm just thrilled that you've been able to increase the amount of survey responses, double what you had previously. It really shows the effort that you've put into this while also meeting the needs of our community members during this global pandemic. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate getting to share that. And I appreciate your last question you asked, Chair Harrington. I look forward to working with Angie, Tanya on that. Thanks.
Great. Well, we'll look forward to having this before us for adoption through an action. I think you said on February 23rd. So great. I'm looking forward to a short presentation for the public in that and go from there. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. We are at 8 minutes past 3. We have one final topic. We are ahead of schedule. Good job to everyone today on that. We have a break here for 15 minutes, so we will pick back up. Do you want to try for 3:25, Ms. Angie, with the team, just 5 minutes earlier? Okay.
The team's
great.
on standby. So.
Okay, we'll see you all here at 3:25. Thank you.
Catherine?
Yes, ma'am.
I just got a call from my husband and he went off the road in a ditch. He's okay, but he's waiting for AAA. He could be there for another year and a half.
Poor guy. What part of the planet is he on?
He's just kind of below our house on a road that was fairly steep. He went around a UPS truck and didn't make it all the way around him. The truck, that is.
Bummer, bummer. Well, it's up to you. We're going over the website redesign project overview. So
I don't need to go. He's.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no. He's just, you were just asking about the roads earlier. So I thought I'd give you a personal, up close and personal update.
Bummer. I'm enjoying knowing that it's a balmy 50 degrees here in the flatlands of Beaverton right now.
Well, he just, I think he missed the navigation piece there, I think. The question is, how long will it take AAA to get to him?
Yeah.
You sure you don't want to go get him?
I may have to. No, I'm just going to leave him there, Roy. I think I may have to take him dinner.
During the 1996 floods, I had car trouble, and AAA told me it was going to be like an hour and a half before they could get a towing company out to help me. But I was surprised it didn't take quite that long. So I was in luck.
We'll see.
Yeah. So we're just waiting for Commissioner Willie to join us on camera again. There he is. And Commissioner Fye, we had her there. She is. Okay, well, I think we have a full, whoops, we have a full complement of commissioners now. So we'll move on to the website redesign project overview. So Jack, could you kick us off? And I see we have some additional folks joining us today. So if you could introduce everyone, that would be great.
Thank you very much, Chair Harrington. Good afternoon, and good afternoon, commissioners. We are very excited, and thank you for your time to hear our briefing about the county's website redesign project today. And the purpose for today's briefing, we have a couple purposes. First and foremost, we want to provide you an overview of our project plan and our progress that we have made so far, as well as provide you an update of the current status of the project. And more importantly than our update to you, we would like to hear your input and really hear your feedback on your board's vision and expectations on these projects. That's why we booked quite some time for this briefing to hear your input as well. And presenting with me today is Jennifer Kwan, who is the project manager for this project, as well as Sam Kim, who is Deputy Chief Information Officer for ITS, who is filling in for Chris Gensler, our Chief Information Officer, who couldn't make it to today's briefing. And although that we have a presentation team of 3 today, and I want to say that this project and this product of the presentation has benefited from multiple teams, multiple departments within the county, including the Office of Equity and Inclusion, including the communication team in CAO, as well as the SMEs from the departments. And this is really a collective effort from quite a few internal partners already during this planning stage of this project. And we definitely plan to even engage with the external partners to make this project successful. Before I have the temptation to spill more beans on this project, I want to hand it over to Jennifer Kwan to provide the presentation to your board. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Jack. Well, hello, everyone. Hello, Chair Harrington and the commissioners. It's nice to meet you. And I'm excited for this opportunity to really present this overview of the project. I'm really excited to share the plan and also get your feedback as well. Next slide, please. All right, so the goal of today's presentation is to outline the county website redesign project. We're going to be starting by level setting on a few different things, mainly the current status and the challenges that we're experiencing with the website. That's before we move into the overall mission for this project. Then I'll be going into a little bit more detail about how we're going to be achieving that mission through a few things: content, design, and platform work. We're also going to be looking at the project timeline and budget before we wrap up with your feedback and questions. So please also feel free to jump in with any questions and comments throughout the presentation as well. Next slide, please. All right, so why now? We know that the current website really does not serve the county or the community as well as it could. When the site was built, it was really designed from the perspective of a county employee and not necessarily a community member. We've also received feedback that it's really difficult to find information. So if you look to the far right of the slide, you'll see that there's a screenshot of the navigation bar of our homepage. It's that tan bar, and it's laid out by department. So you can see that to navigate the site, you really have to have a good idea of what each department does. Because of that, it can be really hard for the community to find the information that they need. Technology has also evolved, and there are solutions that are available that are more flexible and also require much less maintenance on the back end, all while providing a better end product to everyone. And finally, Washington County's major last redesign was completed in 2010. Since then, there have been efforts made to really add new features and improvements, like improving mobile viewing, but ultimately the look and feel of the site hasn't shifted much from that original view. And we also know now that the best practice is to redesign a website every 2 to 3 years. So we're really due for a new redesign. Next slide, please. So this brings us to the mission. We know that we need to make a change, and that is to transform the Washington County website into that digital gateway to services for our community. But when you look at this mission statement, what does it really mean? And I think that if we focus on the core mission of this project, the key elements are bolded here, and it's really that we need to focus on digital gateway, services, and community. Next slide, please. So in order to meet our mission, we really need to focus on a few specific areas. And the first of these areas is the content of our website. This is why the users are coming to the site in the first place, and it's to find information. Next slide, please. So this brings us to community engagement. So to ensure that the content on our site is really useful to end users, we know that community engagement really needs to be baked into every single phase of this project. The community relies on the website as that gateway to services for the county. So in order to design a site that meets their needs, we have to engage with them to understand what those needs are and how we can best meet those needs. So to do that, we're currently developing a community engagement plan, and that's with the assistance of a community engagement sub-team. So this team is made up of a few project web team members, as well as Philip Bransford, our communications officer, and Amanda Garcia Snell, who's our community engagement manager. We're also moving forward with the understanding that every single community engagement activity really needs to be widely communicated for maximum participation. So we're considering the CPOs, the CBOs, and other really culturally specific community partners as major stakeholders in this project. Part of this community engagement plan is also the use of surveys, and they will be offered in multiple languages, and that's prior to and during the design phase. And these are going to inform the listening sessions and also our focus groups. We anticipate that these sessions will be co-facilitated, if that's with county employees as well as contracted resources that are attached to the project. And we also want to engage these members of the community in a usability testing program. So this is really going to ensure that users are able to provide feedback on the website as it's being developed so that the team can use that feedback and refine features as they're rolled out. And lastly, we want to utilize what's called a feedback widget. And this is after we launch the redesigned site. So a feedback widget will allow users to provide feedback in the moment. And I'll provide a few examples of this in a few slides. But this is going to allow the county to monitor kind of those trends in feedback and make improvements as we need to. Next slide, please. All right, so it's a transformation. We know that in order to design a site with the community in mind, the website really has to undergo a complete transformation. So this redesign is going to impact every aspect of the website. And this is from the technology that supports it, all the way down to the design that maps out the look and feel of each page's design. So most importantly, we know that rewriting the content of our site is going to be the biggest undertaking of all. So unfortunately, we won't be able to just copy and paste existing content into a new design. Users don't really have the time or desire to wade through those paragraphs and pages of information that's currently on our website. So our strategy is to streamline the content for readability, clarity, and accessibility. We're also going to be working with the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement to ensure that we're really incorporating those pieces of equity, diversity, and inclusion in a really meaningful way. We know that we need to also improve upon our language translation offerings, because we're seeing this as really our opportunity to ensure that the content on the news site is accessible and really easy to understand. So again, to do this, we're going to need the support and participation of departments really across the county. Our content authors will have to be trained on writing and creating web content for accessibility and mobile viewing. They're also going to have to really actively participate in the rewriting of their existing content. So again, this is a big undertaking, but it's really necessary to ensure that the content we're providing is clear, concise, and usable for the community. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're moving on to the design of the website. So even though the content is what we can consider kind of the meat and potatoes of the site, the visual aspect of the redesign is exciting because it's our first chance to really engage with those website users. Next slide, please. All right, so before we dive into some of our examples, I wanted to share the design philosophy for the project. So for the majority of the community, the website is the first point of contact with the county. And we want to make sure that users see something that's really modern and really visually engaging. And more importantly, the new design should make it really easy for users to find the information that they're looking for. So for example, instead of asking users to navigate the site by department, like I showed on that very first slide, they should be able to easily find the answers to their how can I questions, like how can I pay a bill or how can I get a permit? Our metrics are showing us that over 50% of our website traffic is also coming in from mobile devices. So this means that we really need our site to display just as well on a desktop as it does on a cell phone. And that's something that a good design should really be able to help us accomplish. And finally, we know that we don't want to start from scratch. There are a lot of award-winning government sites that the team has researched, and there are elements that are common across all of them. And we really hope to incorporate some of these into our new design in some form. So next slide, please.
Jennifer, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
You just talked about mobile devices and then computer displays.
Right.
And I'm wondering, in terms of the device categories and the constructs, I still tend to think in terms of display monitors for computers, tablets, and smartphones. Is there any design philosophy difference between tablets and those other two categories?
Sure, that's a really great question. I think it all comes down to the screen size. So I'll show you in a few slides what that looks like, but it is true. We need to look at those from the aspect of, a desktop, a tablet, and also a cell phone.
Okay.
I think what you'll see is that when you are scaling down to a cell phone size, you may lose some of the images, but the content is all there. The content should always be the information that the county is seeking. So even though they may not have the full-blown splash page up at the top or images, they will be able to see the content they need and a small image to the side. Great question. All right, so we are on the design inspiration slide. So again, like I was saying, the team has reviewed a number of award-winning websites, but I'll be walking you through 3 of them. And these are what we feel are the best examples. So also please keep in mind that these are just design ideas. We're going to be seeking input from the community and from the county to determine which of those elements are best for our websites. And I'd also love to get all of your feedback at the end of the presentation as well. So next slide, please. All right, this is our first example, which is Baltimore County. I've highlighted a few of the examples of key elements in yellow. So if you look to the top right, you'll see that there is an ADA option to increase text size. At the top center of the page, you're also going to see highlighted in yellow that really clear and consistent iconography for social media. And just below that, you'll see that services are a clear focus. Again, it's going back to that how can I approach instead of having people navigate by departments or having that knowledge that they may not have as a community. And at the center of the page, we have a very prominent search bar. So users really don't have to click any further than the homepage to look up those services or information. So if you look over to the right side, you'll also see that we've included that mobile view of the website. So you'll notice the view has been optimized for mobile delivery. And again, the information is there. It may not look as splashy as on that main website page, but users will be able to find whatever they need on the mobile view just as well as on the desktop or tablet view. Next slide, please. All right, so this is our next site, Larimer County in Colorado. So at the top right, you'll see the I want to search bar. Again, that focus is on services for the user. And just below that, you'll see that there's a language translation button also. I think in our screenshot, it may be a little bit harder to see, but it is in that little white area with a yellow outline. To the left, there's the feedback, website feedback button. So this is an example of the feedback widget that I was speaking about earlier. And this is what we want to use post-launch to gather that in the moment information. And again, in the middle of the page, I think you're going to see that this is kind of a running theme across all of our websites. It's that search bar, and it's front and center for easy access. At the bottom of the page, you're going to see that users can also dive a little bit deeper into services by category. So in this example, we have I want to apply, and they can look for permits or registering to vote, so they can dive a little bit deeper, just another level. And next slide, please. Our last example is from utah.gov. So I think the first thing that you'll see is the homepage is very clean and it's visually engaging. So at the top right of the page, you'll see that there's a settings button with the gear icon. So this opens up a menu that allows the user to select the ADA options to adjust their experience visually. You can see that there are font size options at the top right, and then the visibility settings at the top left. So below that section, you'll also see that the icons are, again, very simple and consistent. And the running theme, again, is that large search bar in the middle of the page. And again, that's that primary way to find information and services. Next slide, please. All right, so this brings us to the last piece of the project. This is the platform and the work that's needed to stand up the website. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a really exciting and transformational project, and the effort that's needed to reach our goal is going to be proportional to its end product. So not only are we replacing all existing website technologies, we're also going to be working closely with the community, multiple vendors, and employees across the county. So a lot of stakeholders, a lot of moving parts here. We're also asking departments to change the way that they think about presenting information to their audiences. This is something that's going to take time, it's going to take training, and really commitment to stick to. But I'm really glad to say that we have the support of a large steering committee, and they've already shown a lot of enthusiasm and support for this undertaking. Next slide, please. So here we have a list of our stakeholder groups. Again, community engagement is really going to be key for the success of this project. Like I was saying before, departments are going to be very involved. Those that write and approve content for the website, as well as those who post that content. We'll also be relying on the CAO, the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement, and the PIOs to provide guidance and leadership throughout the project. On the technical side and project management side, we've got the Information Technology Services team, and we are very committed to making this project successful. And finally, we are going to be managing several consultants and vendor partners who are going to be involved at different stages of the project as well. Next slide, please. All right, so I wanted to cover both the project timeline and the budget in the next slides. So from this slide, you can see that we are in the initiation and planning stage currently. And this is setting us up for success in later stages. So during initiation and planning, what we're trying to do is get all of our vendors onboarded. So vendor contracting should be complete at the end of the planning and initiation phase. This will set us up for platform execution. So during platform execution, this is where we're going to be working with those content authors to train them on how to write best for this new designed website, writing for mobile and accessibility. This is also where the web team is also going to be creating that platform, just making sure that everything is set on the technical side so that we can move into what we're calling migration execution. So in this phase, this is where we're rolling all of that rewritten content into the new website. So all of the hard work that the departments have been doing to rewrite their content, find imaging that works for the new website, that's all going to be transferred over to the new site. And we're also going to be focusing on those rollouts by actions and services. So again, it's those how can I questions, how can I pay my bill, focusing on that so that the ultimate end experience for the user is not as frustrating. It'll be easy for them to find exactly what they need in terms of information and services. And we're also going to be engaging in usability testing here too. So this is where we're going to be involving the community, involving county employees to test out the website to see if it's working the way that they expect it to. And if it isn't, the web team can take those pieces of feedback and use those to ultimately make the site better. And this sets us up for phase 1 closing. So that big red box up at the top of the screen is our homepage is live date. So that's going to be 4/4 of 22. So when we say that the homepage is live, that means that it is turned on and that the services-based questions and functions are working. So if someone types in, I want to pay my bill, or I want to find a license for my dog, they'll be able to type that into the search and a search result should pop up and take them to exactly what they need. Again, that's just that visual search and making sure that users can search really successfully on the platform. But this doesn't mean that everything is done and that we can just wrap up the project, because then we head into what we're calling migration execution of phase 2. So these are the more complex features of the website, things that may take a little bit longer for the web team to make sure are working correctly. But this doesn't mean that the public will not be able to access those, because they will be existing on the older website. It's just going to take us a little bit longer to convert that over to the redesigned site. But we are hoping to have that wrapped up in phase 2 closing. So when we say that phase 2 has closed, that means that all of those dependencies to the old website are turned off. And that way we can say that ultimately at the end of phase 2, we will be fully on our new website. So that will be the end of July of 2022. And again, I just want to call out, you'll see at the very bottom of the timeline, community engagement is going to be present and baked into every phase of the project. So it's not just an instance, it is something that we are thinking about as part of the whole project. Next slide, please. So I also want to share the overall budget for this project broken down by year. So you can see that the cost will be ramping up through 2022, and this is because of an increase in vendor participation. So as we get into platform execution and migration execution, we are going to be working with a variety of vendors to complete the project. Next slide, please. All right, so this brings me to the end of my slides, and I would really love to open it up for questions at this point. But also, I'd like to take this opportunity to ask the board and you, Chair Harrington, about what your goals are for this redesign project and what you'd like to see, and really what does success look like to all of you?
Jennifer, before we get to that part, if I may just add one important message about the budget piece is while we look at the fiscal year 21-22 budget, there's $600,000 that's planned for that. I just wanted to bring a clarification to the board that has been part of our general fund projection as well. So that is a part of our projected capital investment in the ITS area in the projection. So this will not be a new addition to the fiscal year 21-22 budget ask. I just thought I'd bring that clarification to your board. Back to you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Jack.
Well, I'm struggling a little bit here because there is a whole plethora of questions and also comments that I know I have individually, but also while I appreciate this broad question, I think this is the first time we're hearing what the approach is and have the opportunity to think about what our own thoughts and needs are. So I think there's going to need to be a touch back for us as a group. For example, I know 3 of us were new to the board as of January 2019, and we have a 4th member new as of January of this year. No one's ever asked me as a board member, what would I like our current front door website to offer to support me in my job? I think that's an important question. And I think it's a question that all of my colleagues on the board of directors deserve to have answered. I don't think we should be living with the current presentation as we have it today. That being said, there are a bunch of things about our current website that I do like. And I'm happy to expand on those. I do have more that I can say here. I can also share that I've been through this whole major redesign as an elected official once at Metro. I also have had the experience of needing to rely upon information from 24 different cities and 3 counties across our Metro area. So I have certainly spent a lot of time visiting other websites. I also seem to have this unique skill of breaking technology. I am also a major user of websites, particularly search capabilities. So you might, as much as I really don't need to sign up for something else, past experience has taught me that I should sign up to be one of the testers for this, like it or not. But let me pause here and see, commissioners, what are your thoughts? I see Commissioner Rogers and Commissioner Treese are unmuted.
Go ahead, Roy.
Oh, sure, I defer to you. Nope, all right. Yeah, it just seems a little premature, and I feel a little embarrassed bringing this up with consultants sitting here, but I've only heard very, very, very generalized, and for our consultants, I'm the outlier. I'm the one who hasn't been here a while. This is new in terms of the dollars. I see in the 1920, we budgeted 150,000. I guess I didn't see that embedded in the budget. So shame on me or shame on all of us if we didn't know this was all coming. But we just dealt with another topic not long ago this afternoon that we had to tell someone that $100,000 was a lot to come up with all of our upcoming activities. So I'm not opposed, and I certainly can understand the value. It just $1 million right now is just coming to me as saying, were we always anticipating that? I mean, if we were.
We have had this project on our multi-year plan, and we do know that the underlying technology is being end-of-lifed. So our team has done an extraordinary job of keeping things running and going and adding new components and new technology in the underlying construct, but they do need to move to a new platform. I think we don't need to be bored with those details, but what little information I recall over the last 2 years is I think they plan on moving over to a new open technology Drupal, and have been using this time over the last year plus, right, with a little delay via COVID. We've kept all of our IT folks busy trying to figure out how to support telework and remote working for the last year. Thank you very much, team. I appreciate that. So they have been working on this. It's been recognized that we will need to make a major investment in the technology. And this is really the kickoff with us to sort out how we want to go through this. So I think it's reasonable for each of us to have the reaction of, wow, okay, so this is the first presentation of how we might go about this. And need a little bit of time to reflect on that, and then come back with the team to say, okay, well, what about this and what about that? So go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Harrington, and thank you, Commissioner Rogers. It definitely brings up a really good point, which I did not clarify earlier, is we do not intend this to be the one and only opportunity to get your board's input. We actually imagine and plan to get your input throughout the project and then bring back periodic updates on the project back to your board as a briefing at future work sessions. So I know that this is a lot of pressure to kind of unpack all the information to you and then try to narrow down to just a few important things. But right now we're really just trying to solicit your first impression as what are like the things that might have been bothering you for a long time that we can add it to our list, but really the communication and the input process, it will be ongoing and throughout the project.
I'll just finish by saying then I knew, as I said, we've been talking in generalities. This is some real details. And when I hear comments about this is the budget, here's the vendors we're going to have to hire, not by name, but what kind of specificity we're going to need in broad terms. It sounds like it's a little more down the road than I envisioned it was. So I'll be quiet and listen politely. I guess I'm a little startled that this is the way it was presented, but you did what you did.
Well, thank you for that feedback. I think that I can speak a little bit about the vendors that we will be using, and maybe that'll help with the timeline piece and budget piece. We are engaging with a content rewriter, and that content rewriter will be helping to train our county employees. Like I was speaking to before, the way that the content will need to be written for the new website is drastically different. You know, we need to write for mobile, so plain language will need to be utilized. We're also going to look at streamlining things to make sure that, you know, as we look at that mobile view, it won't be paragraphs and paragraphs of information. And it is going to take a big effort to train our folks on how to really effectively write for web. So that is one of our vendors, and they are going to be involved in copywriting and helping us make sure that everything looks right for the new website. We're also engaging with a design firm, and that design firm is helping us with the look and feel, but also more of those technical aspects of the website also. So we've got a great web team and they're ready to go, but we do need some assistance and guidance in how things should look. How are things best optimized for a new website? So they're going to be very involved with us there too. We are working with a consultant who comes with experience from, I think, Multnomah County and City of Portland, who has taken governments through these website redesigns. He's been really helpful in helping us with our timeline refinements, making sure that we have the resources needed in order to move forward effectively with this project. And we are also engaging with a new platform. So we are using the Acquia platform. And as Chair Harrington was saying, we are utilizing Drupal. So those are all big vendor pieces there.
Commissioner Fye?
Yeah. I wasn't sure if you were muted or just waiting to be called. Jennifer, thank you for a great presentation. I really enjoyed your presentation and it's very well detailed, and I'm really excited. You know, new technology and easy, accessible websites and organizations who have great websites really excite me. And I do agree with the chair. There are some things that I like about our website. I've seen other people, but I really like the middle option, or the second option that you present. The Baltimore one was great too. I too am startled by the $1 million budget. And I think we you know, we just had another conversation about what Commissioner Roger talked about. So I think I'm willing to engage more conversation about the budget piece about this, and I'm not sure if I'm the new one, so I'll just bite on it and take the bait and say, is this the right time to invest in our website this much money into, or could we do phases, you know, chunk it out, small portions of it? Because if we're, you know, if we're going to be sensitive to the community and what's happening, and we're going to decline some funds and say yes to some, I think we also need to be cognizant of how much money we're investing in our own internal improvement, which will make the job. I get the reasons, But I say that because I've had people who come to me and express some concerns about the budget forecast and the cuts, the 2% cuts that everyone is going to face, and the level of their concern about that impacting the narrative that we have and the perception that we have in Washington County being the economic engine of Oregon and how that could be impacted. So I'm just putting on my newbie hat and to say the budget is a little bit of a startling. I do agree, and that I'm hoping that we can have more conversation and present more options of how we can, budget this big chunks, so that we're staying true to our principles. When we say to somebody, "You're asking too much," we're also saying that to our own staff and pushing back.
That's great feedback. And yeah, completely valid. I think that we do need to have more conversations about this, and I can definitely work with Sam and Jack, and we can talk about this further and bring some solutions to the board, and yeah, again, further discuss.
Yeah, thank you.
Harrington, can I just respond, Commissioner Thai? This marks my, I guess, third government website redesign, and what has not gone well, and I really appreciate yours and Commissioners Rogers, I'm going to call it the sticker shock of what websites really cost. Because I've been there from a staff perspective, having that sticker shock. And what has not gone well in the process is when there hasn't been the investment on the content and the user engagement. And that really does drive up the cost of actually the hardware infrastructure. Jennifer had spoke to Drupal, which I still don't really understand what Drupal is because I'm not an IT expert. But that is actually the lesser of the cost, but it is transitioning to a user-centric content rewrite, training staff in what I'll call a train the trainer approach. So then we understand what that approach is really what drives the cost of this, of a website redesign. I would also encourage the board to think about our website is our #1 communication tool with the community. And so this is truly a front door portal. And we're seeing that right now in the midst of COVID, in the sheer number, and I don't know what our latest website hits are on our COVID pages, but it's significant. And so I think from a user standpoint, as we look at the implementation of our elite policy, how we engage in multi-generations, multi-users is something to just be considered from a board perspective. So I just want to share my perspective, having gone through, this will now be the third website redesign.
And Tanya, if I may add a comment to that, is that we truly believe from support services ITS perspective that a well-designed and a catering to the community website is actually a tool that can help the county find efficiencies. It will actually reduce a lot of other costs about human phone calls, about unnecessary kind of getting misguided in the website to not only enhance the county service level, but at the same time provide other cost-saving mechanisms. And just to use an extreme example that may not necessarily be direct comparative, but it paints a picture, is if you can imagine that the way that Amazon does its business is by people taking phone calls or directing the users to the right website in their page, you can imagine how much more cost Amazon would incur rather than having a really efficient, really sophisticated workflow system that's built into their website. And that's kind of what we're shooting for, not necessarily a business model like Amazon, but really the efficiency that can be realized with the website and the content that we have on that. So while the investment obviously is high, but we really feel that this is something that will bring even more benefit to the county in terms of dollars and the benefit. I just wanted to add that input from a department perspective.
I'd like to step in here for a moment and recognize that this meeting is successful. This presentation is successful. because it is our first engagement on this big, very important project. And what we're figuring out together is, how do we need to be engaged? How do we need to approach this so that staff has input from us that is useful to them, that we as commissioners have confidence in this massive project that is our front door to our community, and that will need to have longevity. So as we're all going, whoa, 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 ooh, ooh, I have this need, and what about that? That's all good. And I want you all, Jennifer, Sam, Jack, Tanya, to please know that this is all good and we're building from here. So thank you. And let's figure out how to come back to this in another month and a half or so, continuing that data mining from us as commissioners. You know, I don't know if, for example, if we should have individual briefings to try and, you know, engage us and pick some comments out of our brains via one-on-ones, or if we should wait and try and do this together in another work session. So what I do know is that from the major change to a new platform that we went through at Metro, as well as a new content architecture, and then all of the new content development that you've talked about here, it sounds familiar to me, right? But I also know that as an elected official, it will be helpful for me to be on this journey if we have a future touch point with, here's what it might take, or here's what form it might take, right? I'm not the decider on the architecture, and I do not want to be. I really appreciated how you took us through 3 examples, because as I read this presentation ahead of time, one of the questions I was like is like, okay, so these are award winners, but based on what factors? And how do we relate our factors for success, right? What are the characteristics of success for this project for us versus how they defined characteristics for success? And so I think it might help a little bit for us to hear some of that from you, and for us to either say, oh, well, what about this, right? And then come have a touch point with a thumbs up on that final set, and then go through the next steps, because I think that's going to help us understand what the investment of time and money is involved with this really important project. Go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
Thank you, Chair. Darn it. It's like.
Of course it happened. Murphy's Law is really getting you today. It's okay.
Well, first of all, I want to say that if we take a flashback and we talk about our board initiatives, do you remember you asked me if I would be involved in the communications piece? And as a result of that, I had the opportunity to go through this presentation last week prior to all of you seeing it. And there are a couple things that struck me. We talked about really making sure that this approach reflected our values here, and I think that was a key piece. We talked about that quite a bit, and I would echo what you've said, Chair, and that is that as I've been listening to everybody, with the exception of Commissioner Willie, in what we have is engagement. And that's a huge issue. We have people that are saying, okay, you know, I'm interested in what's happening. I want to watch this. I want to see what's going on, and I want to be involved. So I share your enthusiasm about the fact that people are engaged. I would also say that since the three of us came on the board, we have been talking as a board about your new website. I think that was one of the things we shared among ourselves. Wow, this is not, I would, especially when you look at websites like Metro, like some of the cities in our region, not, and leaving alone the samples that were brought to this presentation today. I am impressed with the thoughtfulness of the presentation, the thoughtfulness of the process, and I was impressed again by the fact that Jennifer, Sam, Jack were asking for input. This is not something that I feel is a baked deal at all. That this is a process that is welcoming of input, not just from the commission, but also from all of staff and the community. It has to be, it's going to have so many different purposes. The other thing that impressed me was the fact that there was concern and sensitivity about those who had been engaged in the website and had ownership up to this point, and making sure that they were involved in the process as we move forward to continue to improve, instead of just saying, you know, that stinks and we're going to move forward. So I appreciated the opportunity, and I'm impressed with the process. There is sticker shock. This is not my first rodeo either, and I know how expensive it can be. So and it's a lot more expensive to fix it than it is to do it right, and that's what we mentioned before. So with that, I am encouraged by the engagement, and that's where I think where we want to be moving forward. So thank you for the presentation.
I didn't hear you, Chair. So did you? Okay, sorry. Well, yeah, I would agree that $1 million is a lot of money to spend on a website, but I liken it, Roy, to, you know, the last time we did this was 2010. It's 11 years. Technology has significantly changed in that 11 years. And it's like we bought a brand new Toyota in 2010 and we never changed the oil, we never changed the tires, the brakes, didn't take it in for maintenance. And then we complain about what it's going to cost to buy us a new Toyota in 21, 11 years later, or maybe this is a little better than a Toyota. But the fact of the matter is, this website is an extremely critical part of communicating Washington County and what we do and what we do best. And unfortunately, it's been exactly the opposite for the last several years. It's been communicating a message of, wow, I'm not sure this county is really up to speed technologically, or at least in their communication. So yeah, I have no idea. This is certainly not in my bandwidth. I mean, somebody tells me we're going to go through this. I like the search bar part. I mean, yeah, that's about as far as I could go on this, because that's where I start on everything I do. I would type in what I want on the search bar and it better dang well give it to me. So anyway, yeah, this is a lot of money, and it would have been good if back in 1920 we'd have had a budget that said we're going to spend $1 million on this. I don't know, maybe we did and I didn't pay attention, but again, this is something that we so desperately need, and I like where we're going with this, and it's kind of the cost of catching up and doing business. That's my perspective on it. So that's my 2 bits worth. They're my $1 million worth.
Chair, you might be on double mute.
I sure was. Thanks. I haven't been using that all day and I got myself into trouble. Thank you. So earlier when I spoke, it was really from the standpoint of, as chair, trying to facilitate the conversation and where we go from here. Now I'd like to share my individual feedback as one of 5. Here are some things that I'm interested in knowing more about. The service level needs from each department as it affects your redesign. I want to make sure that each, and I'm using the word department because they are the agency customers, right? Not the general public customers, our population of residents and businesses that we serve, as well as community partners, by the way. I'm interested in knowing how you've used a system to gain feedback from folks about, with our current website, what do they like? What don't they like? And I want to answer these questions too. What are their unmet needs today or as they look out into the future? What are areas of functionality, the capability that they want to retain and others that they'd like to improve or enhance? I think we also need to take stock of what information we should just archive, right, and leave behind. I appreciated that you talked about the content design and the platform, the content, the design, and the platform work. I think we're all going to need to understand the vocabulary a little bit better, so we're referring to the right things and how maybe we'll see some presence of that through the budget, right? So just so that we're on the journey. A couple of things that I do like about our current website is how I remember that 2010 redesign and how we've had these big buttons on the screen and how those big buttons change over the course of time to give me a sense of what's happening, right? Or what's new, right? And sort of we use the media releases as a way to pump out information of here's what's new today. So I'm not saying design it that way, not by any stretch of the imagination, but I would like to understand what it is, the construct, what that framework might entail for what you all as the greater team decide is that presentation style. I will say one of the things that I like from the Metro website is how they have a category on a program page that has related documents. So I'm able to find a page on a program, and it took me a while to understand the setup because they have some tabs with history and so forth. So, there are pros and cons. And once again, really, I'm not intending to be the designer. No way, don't want to do that. But I recognize I am a heavy user, both through my phone as well as through my computer. So to the degree that you want to do some data mining out of my head and out of my usage, I'm happy to do that. But I think this is an exciting project for us. We're just trying to figure out how to be on the journey so that we feel successful in our work, in our role, as well as that we're seeing that the agency is well engaged and represented for all of our shared constituencies. So if you can take a deep breath and ponder all that information from the 5 of us, and then collectively as sort of the 6th, right? We're that 6th entity, and let us know how to be on that journey successfully with you. I think it'll be really great.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. Oh, sorry to
No,
interrupt you.
I was going to say that's it from me, and I wanted to turn it back to you to see if you had any last comments and to see if there are any other last comments from commissioners.
Thank you very much, Chair Harrington. I just wanted to reiterate that this is only the first opportunity that we're engaging with your board in the work session, and then we want to continue to get your input and get your feedback throughout the project, no matter if it's from the design perspective, from the user perspective, internal or external, as well as the cost of the project and how to financially manage it. We would like to engage with you throughout the whole journey. As you describe it really well, that it's a journey that we're hoping to be on along with you and all the stakeholders, and then that will help us to ensure the success of this project.
But I think, Jack, if I could say, I don't want there to be too many visits, right?
Oh.
So I think that we've got to figure out a roadmap.
Yep.
Otherwise, I know I don't want to be in a situation of, oh, website again. So we got to figure that out.
Absolutely. We will take, well, first of all, thank you all for your feedback and your input today. We will take all of that input going back and work that into our project plan so we can actually find the right timing and the frequency to engage with your board on the input without really engaging, like you said, too much or not having enough touches with the project plan on that. Now, Sam has been on the call with us very quietly. He's really here to support any technical questions or anything. And, you know, I just want to reiterate that Jennifer is a project manager that does an excellent job of managing the project, but there's a whole team of technical experts that's actually behind her, providing the work and the input and all the like the technical pieces that you may not necessarily need to hear or want to hear of all of that. I want to pass it on to Sam to see if there's anything to add from the technical team or really just from ITS overall team in general.
You bet. Hey, thank you so much, Jack, for that intro. And commissioners, chair, county administrative officer, I really appreciate this opportunity. This is also my third time going through Drupal transformation from old decrepit technologies, and it is in terms of cost and effort and so forth. The technology we're using, the architecture, the design, this is the right approach. It took us a while to get to this point. It took a lot of effort, but I think we have the right technical expertise, right consultants on board, and the right technology. So this is where it has been proven in the industry to be highly successful. But as Ms. Angie has indicated, it's the content, it's the rewrite, it's the navigation, and it's the service-oriented nature of the website that's going to make the difference. Not the technology. Technology is the cheap and easy part, but rest of the effort involving all of the departments and as well as you is going to be where the efforts will be. So let me know if you have any questions, technical or otherwise.
I have one. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
I just wanted to say, while the chair said she doesn't want to be in a position of, oh, not the website again, I really don't want to be a commission where our project team is saying, oh, the commissioners again. So I really want to make sure that we recognize as the commission that we are one partner here, that we've got community, we've got departments, we've got, you know, expertise, and it's really important for us to understand where we sit too. So thank you for that.
We really appreciate that. The projects that I've been on with the previous two counties I've worked in, we wished for greater input from our governing body, and it was really sad that there was just so little input. And I really am encouraged by your feedback. And yes, we'll achieve that balance, and we'll definitely get your input as well as rest of the residents of the county.
I have one last question that is, I guess, kind of technical in nature. You know, we get emails and notifications from you at ITS about phishing and scams and hacking. And then we also see on the national news, what was Diane can remind me of that name, that Solar Winds or whatever it was recently. And, you know, on the news, they've been talking the last couple of weeks about how there's this attack that's just been sitting there and waiting to happen. So I have so appreciated that our Washington County ITS team takes care of all that magic. I don't have to stay awake at night wondering if our web servers are going to be taken over and all of a sudden our assessment and taxation or our election stuff is defeated. You guys have really impressed me. And I'm wondering, how does those security needs factor into this whole new program and process that you're going through?
Well,
I want it to be seamless to me, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. The sausage gets made at the back end, and I'd be happy to explain that and give you a tour. But at the end of the day, we have highly skilled staff, and we do monitor and we partner with Homeland Security to detect any kind of these intrusions. In fact, it was Homeland Security that was very much involved with the SolarWinds impact. As you know, some of the more of the latest news is that a water district in Florida was almost going to get poisoned with sodium hydroxide lye because they left the remote control on, and they turned that off immediately, and they were able to avert poisoning of their population. I mean, these things are scary, scary events, and I think the more we pay attention to security, and thank you so much, Chair Harrington, for bringing that up. Information security should be everybody's job, but it's not the technology necessarily that's going to protect us. Although technology plays a huge role, it's the people, and that's why there's so many of these phishing simulations, and so many of reminder, think before you click, and because they know that technology can actually stop dead a lot of these attacks. But if people give away their password, if people open the door wide open for everybody to walk in, if they forget to lock that door after walking through, it's just like physical security at your house. You can really secure your house, but if your kids leave the back door open, well, that can be a vulnerability. And frequently that's how these attacks are done. So we have to train our people to be very, very careful and not just rely on antivirus and our firewalls and all other monitoring technology. Those are important, but just as important is the fact that we are also diligent, every single one of us users. But thank you for giving me that opportunity to do this public announcement.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah. So how do you want to wrap us up, Jack and Ms. Angie? Really appreciate hearing from you, Jennifer, and better understanding this, and you as well, Sam.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. We feel that we have received a lot of good input from you and the rest of the board, and we want to go back really, as I explained, unpack the information that from you as well, and build future engagement into the future work plans for the project, and then we can bring a proposal back, maybe as you suggested, in a month and a half, 2 months. Usually we try to cater the next update with any major milestones of the project, whether if it's we engage with we have a communication plan or there's any major milestones on that. I think that usually 1.5 to 3 months kind of timeline is actually a really good timeline for us to bring things back to engage with the board, either by work session or by individual briefings, or if it's things minor that we may even communicate that in writing, just off the work session as well. But those are thought process that we're going to go back and really work with the project team to incorporate. And I think we're good. We consider this very successful engaging with your board today as well, and we will be back and with more updates.
So, Chair,
Angie,
I could add to that. Part of that next touch point, we will continue to work through the timeline. As Jennifer presented today, it was a very high timeline. The next update, we will have a board engagement kind of timeline or proposal for you to provide input on and change to meet what your engagement needs are, so that can be integrated throughout the whole process.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Well, colleagues, that brings us to the end of another long day of engagement. I want to share with you that I continue to be really pleased and impressed to work with each of you as my colleagues on the Washington County Board of Commissioners. we've covered a lot of territory today, right? With government relations, policy and investment decisions, transportation through trails, transit, as well as our own health and human services need, disability and aging, and then underlying infrastructure, communications, which is so vital to all aspects of our business. So thank you very much for your attention to the larger strategy as well as the details as we do this work together in working and serving, supporting our greater public. Thank you. Any last comments before we end our work session for today? No? Seeing none, that's it. See y'all later. Stay healthy.
Have a good evening,
stay
commissioners.
safe. Take care. Bye-bye.